Chapter 1088. Tonight the entire Prince Ding mansion was ablaze with lights. The main hall in the front yard of the Prince Ding mansion, which was used for entertaining guests, was also full of guests. Sitting at the head of the table were naturally Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. On the right side were Mr. Qin Yun and the Su family. On the left side were Qin Xiufu, Su Qingchen, and the important civil and military officials of the Prince Ding mansion. Further down were the guests and envoys of various countries. Below, Mo Suiyun and Mo Jingyu sat in the seats of the guests of Dechu State, but both of them looked a little absent-minded. Opposite them, in the seats of the West Hill envoys, an official behind Lei Tingfeng whispered in Lei Tingfeng's ear, "I haven't seen the little heir of the Prince Ding mansion all day." Lei Tingfeng looked up and saw that the seat belonging to the little heir Mo Yuchen was still empty below Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. And he didn't seem to see Mo Yuchen when the two children were doing their homework at noon. Lei Tingfeng glanced at the calm Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li, raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "We are guests, don't worry about these things." Lei Tingfeng didn't care, but it didn't mean that others didn't care. A man from the western region stood up and asked curiously, "Prince Ding, why don't I see the little prince of your mansion?" It was no wonder that these envoys were curious. The western region didn't have much contact with the Central Plains. Others had seen Mo Xiaobao once or twice, but these envoys had never seen Mo Xiaobao. Naturally, they were very curious about the future heir of the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly and said, "The heir is not feeling well and will come later." It was just a simple sentence, but everyone present could understand the meaning and thoughts behind it. Thus, some people's expressions changed slightly, some looked pensive and some looked worried. Mo Xiuyao glanced at the crowd below, and his gaze paused for a moment on Mo Jingyu and Mo Suiyun. Mo Jingyu and Mo Suiyun immediately felt a heavy pressure pressing down on them as if it was real. Mo Suiyun's face paled and he hurriedly lowered his head. The wine cup in Mo Jingyu's hand shook and some fine wine spilled out onto his sleeves. Ignoring the gazes of the people around him, Mo Jingyu hurriedly put down his wine glass and clenched his fists tightly under the table. Mo Xiuyao stood up, raised a glass of wine and smiled. "Today is the first birthday of my son Yufeng and my daughter Yiya. Thank you all for coming from afar. I and the princess consort propose a toast to everyone." Beside Mo Xiuyao, Yi Li also raised her wine cup and proposed a toast to the guests below. Everyone hurriedly stood up and said, "We should be the ones wishing the heir and princess a happy birthday." The guests and the host drank a cup and the hall instantly became lively. Mo Xiuyao waved his hand, and the maids wearing the Prince Ding mansion's uniform immediately came forward to pour wine for everyone. The sound of musical instruments faintly sounded in the hall, and beautiful dancers started to dance. The entire hall was bustling with noise and excitement. After a song and dance ended, the envoys from various countries came forward to present their congratulatory gifts. The gifts from the Prince Ding mansion's subordinates were naturally normal. Some were treasures that symbolized peace and joy, and there were also some interesting things among them. However, the gifts from the various countries were different. Not only did they flaunt their country's treasures, they also faintly had the intention of competing with other countries. The northern tribes had just fought an earth-shattering battle with the Prince Ding mansion, and had suffered heavy casualties. However, they were also the country that was most anxious to repair their relationship with the Prince Ding mansion. Hence, the northern tribes were the first country to present gifts, and the gifts were not ordinary. The moment the two boxes were opened, the contents of the boxes shocked everyone present. In the cage on the left was a snow-white, flawless and adorable blue-eyed fox. On the other side in a box, there was indeed a huge green lotus flower. Although this lotus flower had been plucked, it was still in full bloom in a box carved from cold jade, as if it had just been plucked from a pond. Beside the lotus flower was a dark green lotus seed pod. The others were fine, but when Xin Yang and Dr. Lin saw the items in the jade box, their eyes immediately lit up. Yalu Hong smiled and said, "These are the treasures of the northern tribes, the blue-eyed snow fox and the fiery lotus. We wish the little prince and princess a happy birthday." The crowd was in an uproar. Needless to say, the fiery lotus had a deep relationship with the Prince Ding mansion. There was even a time when Mo Xiuyao's life depended on this lotus flower. However, after Yi Li found a replacement for the sky-falling flower, the idea of plucking the fiery lotus was never mentioned again. However, the fiery lotus was not as simple as an antidote to frost poison. If it was in the hands of a godly doctor like Xin Yang, its effects would not be inferior to the sky-falling flower. As for the blue-eyed snow fox, it was known as the treasure of the northern tribes. Even in the northern tribes it was rarely seen. It was said that it lived on the snowy peak of the western tribes, just like the fiery lotus. Ordinary people would be lucky enough to be able to catch a glimpse of it. The fur of the blue-eyed snow fox was even more precious in the western regions. It was priceless. Not only was the blue-eyed snow fox smart and cute, its fur, flesh, and even blood were all treasures. The people in the Central Plains were fine, but many of the envoys from the western regions were envious of the little fox in the white jade cage. Yili smiled and nodded. "Thank you for the trouble, Crown Prince Yelu. Exener will definitely like the gift from your highness." Although Exener was still young, it was not suitable for her to get close to pets, but this blue-eyed snow fox was still young. In a few years when Exener grew up she would be a good companion. Yiluhong smiled. "How could that be? On behalf of my royal father, this prince congratulates Prince Ding and Princess Consort. At the same time, this prince hopes that our two countries will be prosperous and peaceful." Emo Xiuyao smiled faintly. "This prince offers a toast to the crown prince." Yiluhong nodded and raised his wine cup. "It should be me who proposes a toast to Prince Ding. Please." Everyone present knew that the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes had signed a peace treaty. Yiluhong's declaration was just for the sake of the envoys present. It meant that the dispute between the Prince Ding mansion and the northern tribes would end here. After all, the northern tribes had been weakened by the Prince Ding mansion, and there were many small countries in the western regions that were eyeing them covetously. In this world no one could easily live a peaceful life. Then Lei Tingfeng and Emo Jingyu also came forward to present their gifts. They were all rare treasures. Although Princess Anxi and Pu had not found the little prince's whereabouts, they also presented their gifts appropriately. However, given the relationship between Princess Anxi and the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family, their gifts were naturally not as scheming as the others. They only gave a few precious specialties from Nanzhao. Later on, the envoys from the western regions presented even more strange gifts. Many of them were things that the people of the Central Plains had never seen before. It was an eye-opener for many people. Although Prince Ding had no intention of ascending the throne, it was already a grand occasion where people from all over the world came to congratulate him. In the midst of the singing and dancing, some of the guests suddenly groaned in pain while holding their abdomens. Soon, like a plague, more than half of the people in the hall had collapsed. After a while, the remaining half also collapsed. Everyone seemed to have been stripped of their bones, lying weakly on the ground, unable to move. Only Emo Xiuyao, who was the most powerful among them, was still sitting steadily. However, his expression was not good. Chapter 1089. Prince Ding, what's going on? The envoys of the western regions clearly did not expect to encounter such a situation. They looked warily at Emo Xiuyao, who was sitting in the main hall. They thought that the Central Plains people were plotting something, but when they saw that the Su family and the Prince Ding mansion's trusted aides had all collapsed, they couldn't help but feel even more confused. Emo Xiuyao sat in a wide chair, one hand supporting Yili, who was leaning on him. He said calmly, "I also want to know what's going on. Emo Jingli, are you still not coming out?" "Huh. Emo Xiuyao, you've finally fallen into my hands." At the entrance of the main hall, a man wearing a bright yellow dragon robe walked in. He looked at the guests who had collapsed in a mess with a smug expression. Emo Jingli waved his hand, and many men wearing black clothes and holding swords rushed in, surrounding the main hall. Emo Jingli walked to the center of the main hall proudly and looked up at Emo Xiuyao. His Ming Emperor's dragon robe shone brightly under the candlelight. Other than his pale face, Emo Jingli really did have the aura of an emperor. "Emo Xiuyao, you didn't expect this, did you?" The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. "In the end, the winner is still me." Emo Xiuyao looked calmly at his smug face and said calmly, "I don't see what you have to be so proud of." Emo Jingli laughed coldly. "Emo Xiuyao, you don't need to put on an act to scare me. Can you still move? My agarwood intoxication will poison the stronger the person. If you could still move, would you still be sitting there talking to me?" Emo Xiuyao lowered his eyes and smiled. "If that's the case, why don't you come up and try?" Emo Jingli's eyes narrowed. He stared warily at Emo Xiuyao for a while, then laughed and said, You're right, I don't dare to come up. So you don't need to provoke me. I don't even need to come up to kill you. Emo Xiao nodded and said, so, the so-called Emperor Chu is a piece of trash that even a person who has lost all of his internal energy is afraid of? No wonder did Chu State's Empress Dowager and her subjects wanted to depose you. If it was I would have crippled you 800 years ago. Compared to Emo Jingqi, you're still lacking. Emo Jingli's eyes flashed with anger. If the person he hated the most in his life was Emo Xiao, then what he hated the most was people saying that he was inferior to Emo Jingqi. He could admit that he was inferior to Emo Xiao, but he never thought that he was inferior to Emo Jingqi. What? It's a pity that he's dead, and soon you'll be dead too. 100 years later, the people of the world will not think that I am inferior to you. They will only know that I defeated Emo Jingqi and you Emo Xiao. I am the true #1 person in the world. Speaking of pride, Emo Jingli did not forget to look at Yili beside Emo Xiao. He smiled and said, Yili, don't you think so? Yili calmly looked at him and lightly said, if you think so, then so be it. It was just a simple sentence, but it caused Emo Jingli's expression to change 3 times in an instant. This was because Yili's words and tone were like she was telling a madman that everything he said was right. Yili, come down. I can spare your life. Don't try any tricks, your internal strength is not strong. Even if you use a bit of strength, it's not like you can't move. Emo Jingli stared at Yili and said in a low voice. Emo Xiao held Yili's waist and looked at Emo Jingli with a cold light in his eyes. You don't need to worry about Yili's life. If you have the time, you should worry about yourself. Or, did I not teach you enough lessons? Emo Jingli was stunned. He seemed to have thought of something and his expression became strange. After a while he finally began to laugh. He pointed at Emo Xiao and said in a fierce voice, Emo Xiao, you're still so arrogant. Even now you can't save your own life, so how can you save Yili? I will definitely make you die an ugly death today. Yili, come here. I can let bygones be bygones. Yili raised her eyes and looked at him as she calmly said, how is it that this consort doesn't know of anything that requires this distinguished one to let bygones be bygones? A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Emo Jingli's eyes. Do you think that Emo Xiao can still protect you right now? Yili smiled without saying anything. She calmly leaned against Emo Xiao's shoulder and ignored Emo Jingli. Emo Xiao held Yili's waist with one hand and played with the wine cup in his hand with the other. He looked at Emo Jingli and said, I am very curious. How did you poison her? In the Prince Ding mansion it was definitely not easy to poison someone. Otherwise, the people in the Prince Ding mansion would have been poisoned hundreds of times already. In the wine? That's not right. Even the people who didn't drink were poisoned. In the candle. Emo Jingli's eyes flashed and he smiled. Prince Ding is truly quick-witted. This colorless and tasteless agarwood was not wasted after all. It's a pity that Prince Ding doesn't know about it now. Don't you think that it's too late? Emo Xiao shook his head and said, even so, it's impossible for your people to do it. Who else can step forward now? Let I see what kind of people would dare to do such a thing behind Ai's back. The hall was completely silent. No one stood up. This scene made Emo Jingli feel like he had lost all face. These people had helped him in secret, but now that Emo Xiao was about to die, these people still didn't dare to step forward and openly stand behind him. Emo Jingli didn't know that in these people's eyes, unless they saw Prince Ding's head being separated from his body, they wouldn't have the courage to stand out and openly betray the Prince Ding mansion. Emo Xiao has already been poisoned. What are you afraid of? Emo Jingli said coldly, looking at the people present with a threatening gaze. Not long after, one person stood up, then another. In a short while there were more than 10 people who stood up. Among them, there were the heads of famous families who couldn't be placed in important positions as well as officials. There was also a former general of the Dechu state who had surrendered to the Mahist army. It was clear that these people were pretending to be poisoned. Emo Xiao's gaze swept over these people indifferently, finally landing on Emo Jingyu, who was still lying on the side. He said indifferently, King Yu, you should also get up. Emo Jingyu was startled. Finally he sighed slightly and stood up. Emo Jingli looked at him proudly and said with a smile, Emo Xiao, do you see? Do you think that everyone will be loyal to you and that everyone will be afraid of you? Aren't there still so many people who have betrayed you? Emo Xiao said with a calm expression, betrayal? I never planned to use them. What kind of betrayal is that? A bunch of trash. If you like them, then take them. Otherwise, you can ask them if they know any secrets about the Prince Ding mansion, or if they know any information about the Mahist army. Or, even if I were to die now, do they have a way to send you out of Glass City alive? Hearing Mo Xiuyao's words, the faces of the people who stood up became even more unsightly. Mo Jingli's expression changed. He sneered, since I dared to enter the Prince Ding mansion, I didn't plan on leaving alive. But to be able to drag you, Mo Xiuyao, and so many people here down with me, my death is worth it. Chapter 1090. Then congratulations, Mo Xiuyao said without much sincerity. Mo Jingli stared irritably at Mo Xiuyao, who was sitting on the throne. A sense of helplessness rose in his heart. It had been like this since he was young. It was as if he could never gain the upper hand in front of Mo Xiuyao. No matter how bad Mo Xiuyao's situation was in this dangerous situation, it was as if the one who always lost was him. If he had Ling Taihan's or even Mu Qingsong's strength, he could take this opportunity to rush up and stab Mo Xiuyao. But even in this situation he still didn't dare to get close to Mo Xiuyao. He was afraid of Mo Xiuyao. Mo Jingli couldn't help but admit this in his heart. This was a fact that he had always been ashamed to admit. Kill him for Zhen. Seeing Mo Xiuyao's calm appearance, Mo Jingli suddenly lost his patience and became more and more annoyed. A black-clothed man stepped forward and cautiously walked up the throne room. But when he saw that Mo Xiuyao didn't react, he became more confident that Mo Xiuyao was poisoned. He gathered his courage and took a few steps forward. The man was so agitated that the corners of his eyes twitched a few times. No one would be able to remain calm if they wanted to kill Prince Ding with their own hands. He finally drew his sword and slashed towards Mo Xiuyao. No one saw Mo Xiuyao make a move, but they heard the black-clothed man scream. He was thrown down from the throne room and fell to the ground, spitting out blood. It was clear that he had been thrown down by someone with extremely high internal strength. Everyone present let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that Mo Xiuyao was fine, they didn't know if they should feel lucky or regretful. Mo Jingli's expression turned even uglier. You're not poisoned? Mo Xiuyao ignored Mo Jingli's question and said indifferently, you can't kill I. Now what do you want to do? Mo Jingli's face was extremely ugly. After a while he sneered, so what if I can't kill you? We don't believe that they aren't poison like you. Kill them all. The men in black who came with Mo Jingli were all fugitives who knew that they were going to die. When they heard Mo Jingli's order, they didn't care who the guests were and directly drew their swords to attack. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless arrows pierced through the air. At the same time the guests all stood up. Those who knew martial arts stood up to fight back while those who did not know martial arts dodged. In just a few moments, the men in black that Mo Jingli had brought with him all fell to the ground. He was not subdued by the guests present. Instead he fell to the ground like the previous guest. What's going on? Mo Jingli said angrily. Although he wasn't completely poisoned, the people around him, including Mo Jingyu, weren't spared. You have the nerve to use such a small trick like the agarwood intoxication. Xin Yang's voice came from a corner of the hall. The agarwood intoxication is indeed a very good knockout drug. It's colorless and tasteless. It can be mixed in water and can be burned. It's a pity that the antidote is easy to find. And the most common antidote is the ice jade orchid. But if one takes the antidote made from the agarwood fruit and smells the ice jade orchid, it will become another type of poison. Everyone then realized that the flowers used to decorate the hall were all orchids, and more than half of them were ice jade orchids. Only the ice jade orchid was a type of orchid with very small flowers. It was placed among many other expensive orchids, and if one didn't pay attention they wouldn't be able to see it. Mo Jingli's face turned black. He gritted his teeth and said, Xin Yang. As expected, it's you who spoiled our plans again. Xin Yang smiled and said, Prince Li is too kind. It's just a coincidence. Coincidence, my ass. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Mo Xiuyao clearly knew of his plan long ago. He even knew clearly what kind of poison he was going to use. Prince Ding really has good methods. In order to capture us, he didn't hesitate to risk the lives of so many guests. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and said, if he didn't care about anything when he first came in and just slashed randomly, even if Mo Xiuyao had people secretly protecting him, he definitely wouldn't be able to protect every single one of them. As expected, when these words were said, the guests' faces turned ugly. They didn't care if Prince Ding wanted to capture Emo Jingli, but if he used their lives as bait, that was too much. Prince Ding, what do you mean by this? The envoy from the western regions knew Emo Shuyao the least, so he took the initiative to question him. Emo Shuyao smiled calmly and said, I've frightened everyone. It's just that. The song and dance are boring, so I invited everyone to watch a good show. I guarantee that no one will be hurt. What guarantee does Prince Ding have? Someone asked sharply. Based on the fact that no one is hurt. Genom, King of Gojoseon, Crown Prince Yelu, Queen of Nanzhao, Princess Helan, what do you think? Emo Shuyao asked with a smile. Lei Tingfeng sighed and said, I admit defeat. Prince Ding is brilliant. I concede defeat. Yelu Hong was even more direct. This humble prince admits defeat. I'll add another 1,000 horses to Prince Ding. Since the horses had already been given, there wasn't much of a difference between 10,000 and 11,000 horses. Yelu Hong admitted that he could afford to lose. Princess Anqi was worried about her child. She nodded slightly and said, I concede defeat as well. Princess Helan blinked and giggled. Everyone's eyes lit up and shone brightly. It's said that the people of the Central Plains are very smart. Prince Ding is the smartest among them. I concede defeat as well. Within 2 years, I'll charge you 20% less for the furs and herbs that my northern tribe sells to the Prince Ding mansion. Emo Shuyao nodded satisfactorily and said with a smile, Thank you. Since all of you are so generous, this prince will kindly accept it. Emo Shuyao. Emo Jingli couldn't help but roar. How could he not understand that he had been tricked by Emo Shuyao? He was even used as a bet with the northern tribes and Nanzhao of Xiling. Such humiliation almost made Emo Jingli lose his mind. Emo Jingyu, who had fallen to the ground, was pale and unfocused. Sover, Emo Shuyao said leisurely, Jingli, I told you more than 10 years ago that you shouldn't do things that require you to use your brain. That's not suitable for you. With your personality, if you have the upper hand, how can you make a clean move without humiliating I? If I were you, I wouldn't even enter this hall. I'd just shoot arrows from outside. Do you think I only have these bargaining chips? Emo Jingli sneered. Although he was extremely angry, Emo Jingli was no longer a teenager. He quickly controlled his anger. Emo Shuyao raised his brows and said, What else do you want to say? Oh right, the Prince of Nanzhao is in your hands, right? Emo Jingli sneered but didn't say anything. Emo Shuyao didn't care. He said calmly, So what if he's in your hands? That child is in Glass City, right? Whose house are you hiding in? I don't believe you have many strongholds in Glass City. Who can tell I where Emo Jingli is hiding the Prince of Nanzhao? Emo Shuyao looked down at the people below him. No one spoke for a while. Emo Shuyao lowered his eyes and said, No one is willing to say? I wonder if your family members are willing to say? Everyone's expression changed. Most of them were the heads or important figures of famous families. Their families were definitely not as simple as a normal family with a few dozen people. Hundreds of people were implicated. The calamity of extermination. Everyone trembled. Chapter 1091. Emo Jingli smiled coldly and said, What do you think they know? Emo Shuyao leisurely leaned into the chair. As he played with Yi Li's slender hand, he said with a smile, Jingli, you've suffered at the hands of these people, but you still don't remember. Do you think that, because you have something on them, they will be obedient to you? You think that when they work for you, they won't keep something for themselves? Emo Jingli's expression froze. He swept his gaze across the people on the ground. Many people uncomfortably avoided his gaze. Emo Jingli's heart sank. In the hall, Emo Shuyao clapped his hands and said, Now who will tell I the whereabouts of the little Prince of Nanzhao? The hall was silent for a moment. Finally, a person climbed up shakily. Prince, have mercy. This official will speak. Before he finished speaking, he was kicked out by Emo Jingli, who was standing to the side. The person who spoke was just a scholar who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Even though Emo Jingli wasn't a top expert, his martial arts weren't weak either. Kicking him was like playing around. He raised his leg and sent the person flying. He crashed into a nearby pillar and spat out a mouthful of blood. Emo Jingli smiled coldly and said, Idiot. You think that if you speak, Emo Shuyao will let you go. Emo Shuyao shrugged and showed a rare sincerity. I can let you die more comfortably. In other words, whether they spoke or not, they would die. It was just a matter of how they died. Therefore, the restless crowd fell silent again. Emo Xiuyao wasn't in a hurry. He slowly stood and walked down the hall. His unhurried footsteps gave people an indescribable feeling of pressure. Even the aggressive Emo Jingli couldn't help but take 2 steps back. When he realized his actions, Emo Jingli's face turned green and purple. Official Zhao? Emo Xiuyao walked in front of Zhao Zhifeng and said with a smile. Prince. Zhao Zhifeng's face was pale as he replied in a trembling voice. Where is the little prince of Nanzhao? Emo Xiuyao asked. Zhao Zhifeng shook his head and said, This official doesn't know. Don't know? Emo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows unhappily and said, Then what do you know? Zhao Zhifeng's gaze. He didn't dare meet Mo's eyes. He begged, This official doesn't know anything. Princesses have mercy. This official was muddle-headed and won't dare again. Emo Xiuyao looked at him with a lowered brow. He sighed and said coolly, Throw the entire Zhao family into prison. Choose a day to execute them. Finishing, Emo Xiuyao didn't look at Zhao Zhifeng as though he had no interest in him. Everyone on the ground stilled. They clearly hadn't thought that Prince Ding's interrogation would be so clean and efficient. Or rather, Prince Ding didn't care about the result at all. No. Your Highness, this old official knows his mistake. Your Highness, please spare my life. Zhao Zhifeng cried. Seeing that Emo Xiuyao didn't even spare him a glance, he turned his gaze to Yili, who was sitting in the main hall. Your Highness, this old official was wrong. Wang Fei, please have mercy on this official and his family. They are all innocent. Wang Fei, please have mercy on them. Yili sighed slightly. She looked sideways at Master Qingyun and smiled faintly. Grandfather, this place is chaotic. Let 5th younger brother accompany you back to your room to rest. Master Qingyun was old and didn't want to see too much blood. But he knew that today's situation wouldn't end so easily. He sighed deeply and nodded. Qingyan, come with me. 5th young Master Su, who had been watching the show with wide eyes, looked at Yili with grievance. But he couldn't disobey his grandfather's orders. He could only help Master Qingyun out. When Master Qingyun's figure disappeared from the back of the hall, Yili turned her head to look at Zhao Zhifeng, who was still begging. She asked coolly, Official Zhao said that your family is innocent. Do you know how many people would have died if your plan had succeeded? When Official Zhao did this, did he think for a moment that these people were innocent? I'm afraid you were thinking more about the benefits you would receive if you succeeded, right? Zhao Zhifeng was speechless. Yili took out a thin piece of paper from her sleeve and smiled faintly. This Fei has something here. Official Zhao should take a look. Yili's bodyguard came forward to take the paper. Yili waved her hand and stood up. She walked down the hall steps and personally handed the paper to Zhao Zhifeng. Zhao Zhifeng couldn't help but tremble when he saw it. Yili only gave him a thin piece of paper, but he recognized that it was from a book he had hidden in a secret compartment in his study. And the things recorded in that book were things that he couldn't reveal to outsiders. Once the things in that book were made public, even if Prince Ding spared his life, he wouldn't be able to live. Shitzi, the young Shitzi has been captured. He's hidden in one of my side courtyards outside the city. The young prince of Nanzhao. This official really doesn't know where he is. As soon as this was said, everyone was shocked. Although the young Shitzi of the Prince Ding mansion didn't appear all day, which had already caused many people to speculate, they didn't expect that he was really captured by Emo Jingli. Hearing Zhao Zhifeng's words, Emo Jingli didn't get angry. Instead he laughed loudly. Zhao Zhifeng, do you think Emo Yuchen is still in your side courtyard? Do you really think Zhen will believe you so much? Zhao Zhifeng was silent. Emo Jingli was suspicious. It wasn't impossible for him to send someone to secretly take Emo Xiaobao away after he transferred him. How is it? Emo Xiao, did you win this round or Zhen? Looking at Emo Xiao and Yili, Emo Jingli sneered. Emo Xiao held Yili's hand and looked at Emo Jingli indifferently. Emo Jingli also knew that he couldn't take advantage of Emo Xiao here today. He stared hatefully at Emo Xiao and said, Get out of here, let Zhen out. Otherwise, just wait to collect your son's corpse? Emo Xiao lowered his eyes and said indifferently, I had someone bring a message to you before. Now it seems that you didn't hear it? Emo Jingli was stunned and finally remembered what Emo Xiao meant. He sneered and said, If Jin can't even live, why should Jin care about him? Emo Shuyao frowned and finally nodded. Fine, I said. The longer you live, the more painful it will be. Since you don't believe me, then go out. I promise that in the 15 minutes after you leave the Prince Ding mansion, no one will do anything to you. Emo Jingli stared at Emo Shuyao cautiously, clearly not believing his promise. Emo Shuyao didn't mind and pulled Yili back to the main hall. You're really not afraid that I'll kill your son? Emo Jingli asked. He didn't believe that Emo Shuyao would let him go so easily. Emo Shuyao raised his eyebrows and said, You can try. You think I don't dare? Emo Jingli gritted his teeth and said. Emo Shuyao's expression was indifferent. I said that you can try. Whether or not he could kill him. Emo Jingli hesitated for a moment, but in the end he abandoned his poisoned subordinates and rushed out. Emo Shuyao didn't care about his departure. With a wave of his hand, people immediately came to clean up the main hall and brought in fresh fruits, pastries and wine. The men in black who came with Emo Jingli and the people who betrayed the Prince Ding mansion with Emo Jingli were naturally moved out as well. In less than 15 minutes, the main hall returned to its original state as if nothing had happened. Chapter 1092. I was just joking with all of you. I've frightened all of you. I would like to punish myself with a cup of wine and apologize to all of you. In the main hall, Emo Shuyao raised his wine cup and smiled as he spoke to the people in the hall. The guests in the hall looked at the man in white with hair as white as snow and only felt a cold wind blowing over their heads. They also stood up in confusion and drank a cup with Emo Shuyao. Seeing Emo Shuyao calmly chatting and laughing with everyone, even the princess consort sat beside him with a faint smile, as if she was completely unaffected by the news of the little heir's capture. This made everyone doubt the authenticity of the news of the little heir's capture. But if this was fake, why would Prince Ding let Emo Jingli go at this time? Prince, what do you think Prince Ding wants to do? The official behind Lei Tingfeng glanced at the little Emperor Emo Suiyun who was sitting alone and asked in a low voice. Lei Tingfeng smiled faintly and said, cleaning up, establishing power and at the same time, playing around with Emo Jingli. It has nothing to do with us, don't pay attention to it. The West Hills' current situation did not require any more calculations and risks. What they needed was stability. As long as they could stabilize the current situation and protect the West Hills' vitality, nothing else mattered. Playing around with Emo Jingli? The official stuttered. Obviously he could not accept Lei Tingfeng's conclusion. Creating such a commotion when the various countries came to congratulate them was a slap to the Prince Ding mansion's face. Would anyone really play around with such a thing? Lei Tingfeng sighed and said helplessly, it's really because Emo Shuyao really treated this matter as a joke. That's why. It's even scarier. To treat such an important occasion and matter as a joke, one was either muddle-headed and incompetent, or one did not care about the enemy at all. Emo Shuyao was obviously the latter. That official understood what Lei Tingfeng meant and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He looked respectfully at Emo Shuyao. Prince Ding is so sure that nothing will happen to him? Among the people who attended the banquet tonight, it was not a small matter if any of them were injured, not to mention that the young heir of the Prince Ding mansion was among them. Lei Tingfeng shook his head. He had never felt that he understood Emo Shuyao and perhaps he would never understand him. In the hall, Su Qingchen glanced at Emo Shuyao and said indifferently, aren't you guys going to take a look? Emo Shuyao laughed, there's no need to rush. Let him jump around for a while. It was obvious that he was treating Lei Tingfeng as if he were walking a puppy. Don't overdo it, Su Qingchen reminded him. Even though Emo Xiaobao was very smart and had people secretly protecting him, he was still a child. If Emo Jingli was driven into a corner and did something to hurt Xiaobao, the losses would outweigh the gains. Emo Shuyao helplessly pulled Yili up and smiled, all right, we'll go take a look. We'll have to trouble Brother Qingchen here. Seeing Emo Shuyao stand up, the people who were still discussing paused. They heard Emo Shuyao say with a smile, everyone, I and Princess Consort still have matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave first. We'll have to trouble young Master Qingchen to accompany us. Everyone please enjoy yourselves. Emo Shuyao spoke very politely and tactfully. But it did not prevent the people from understanding. I was going to deal with Emo Jingli. If you don't want to die, then stay here obediently. Seeing Prince Ding leaving leisurely with the princess consort, everyone turned their gaze towards young Master Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen smiled indifferently, looking handsome and otherworldly. Everyone, please feel free. This one will first toast everyone. Please. Young Master Qingchen, please. Glass City was also bustling with noise and excitement tonight. It was the first birthday of the two princes and princess of the Prince Ding Mansion, and all the people were celebrating together. Although it was already late, the important streets of Glass City were still crowded with people, as if it was a festival. There were also many people who were praying for the princes and princesses in various ways. From this, one could see the Prince Ding Mansion's status and reputation in the hearts of the people of the Northwest. Mo Jingli quickly shuttled through the dark alleys of Glass City. He had already taken off the dazzling dragon robe he was wearing, and he was only wearing a dark inner robe. If Mo Jingli was like a complacent emperor at the banquet, the current Mo Jingli was like a disheveled stray dog. Mo Shuyao kept his promise and knew that no one would stop him from leaving the Prince Ding Mansion. However, this did not make Mo Jingli feel at ease. He always felt that there were countless Mahist army shadow guard and Qilin secretly following him, ready to catch him off guard at any time. Fortunately, it was already May and he was only wearing his inner robe, so he did not feel cold at all. Mo Jingli walked through the darkest alleys of Glass City, so he did not attract much attention. After walking through the alleys for more than an hour, Mo Jingli thought that he had shaken off the people following him at the Prince Ding Mansion. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and use his qinggong to head in another direction. In a secret room, two children who looked exactly the same sat on the side of a simple bed. In their hands, they were holding a baby who was sleeping soundly in swaddling clothes. Mo Xiaobao looked at the baby in Qin Lai's arms and couldn't help but reach out to poke his little face. So ugly. Qin Lai said coolly, "You looked like this when you were little." Mo Xiaobao did not believe it. "That's impossible. Lin and Xen were very pretty when they were little." Qin Lai said, "This only proves that the second prince and the little master are better looking than you." Mo Xiaobao snorted and proudly glanced at his little face, saying, "You don't need to be jealous of this prince's extraordinary handsomeness. Don't you look the same as this prince now?" Qin Lai looked at the ceiling of the secret room and rolled his eyes. Mo Xiaobao looked outside and frowned, saying, "Mo Jingli will be back soon. Let's take this little demon and leave quickly." A certain person's biggest mistake was not knowing that a crafty rabbit has 3 burrows and put all his chips in one place. Therefore, Mo Xiaobao brought people to follow Qin Lai and coincidentally found the little prince of Nanzhao Kingdom who had been missing for several days. After leaving Princess Anxi, the little prince had suffered a lot. Mo Jingli naturally did not know how to take care of children, nor would he treat other people's children well. He just maintained a state where he would not starve to death. When Mo Xiaobao found him, Qin Lai was busy coaxing the child. Reality proved that even though Qin Lai had been trained to follow the Prince Ding Mansion since he was young, he was far inferior to Mo Xiaobao when it came to coaxing children. At least Mo Xiaobao had 2 younger siblings to practice with. After successfully coaxing the little prince whose voice was hoarse from crying to sleep, Mo Xiaobao discussed with Qin Lai how to retreat. Qin Lai said coolly, "This courtyard is filled with Mo Jingli's people. You being able to enter does not mean you can leave. Also, you have a child with you." A half-year-old baby did not know anything. Once he woke up, he would definitely cry endlessly. Also, this child was too young and too weak. Qin Lai did not dare to take the risk with him. Mo Xiaobao lowered his head in dejection. "I made a bet with Royal Father that I could not use the Shadow Guard in Qilin." Qin Lai resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "You used such an important matter to bet?" Mo Xiaobao pointed his finger guiltily. "It's only because it's important that I bet." Royal Father would not lower himself to make a bet with him over a small matter. Chapter 1093. What are you betting? If I win, I don't need to be locked up. That was why young Master Mo spent so much effort to use himself as bait to find Mo Jingli's tracks and refused to mobilize the Shadow Guard behind him to help. Being locked up was too terrifying, too cruel, and too unreasonable. "I knew it would be like this. What do you want to do now? May I ask what makes you think that the 2 of us can kill Mo Jingli?" Qin Lai asked coldly. Mo Xiaobao hesitated. "Poison? Do you have it?" Qin Lai asked. "I have a poison that makes people have diarrhea." Mo Xiaobao said. Mr. Chen wasn't willing to give him a poison that could take people's lives. Qin Lai nodded seriously and said, "You can pray that he dies from diarrhea, Mo Xiaobao could only roll his eyes. By the time Mo Jingli died from diarrhea, it would be too late. Mo Xiaobao's eyes turned and he said with a smile, "I got it, I'll tell you." Moving close to Qin Lai's ear, Mo Xiaobao whispered. Hearing his words, Qin Lai's eyes twitched and he asked, "Is it okay?" "Definitely no problem. Just wait for the show." Mo Xiaobao said with a smile. Qin Lai was silent for a moment before saying sincerely, "There will be retribution for being too wicked." Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes at him. "Don't say it like you aren't interested." Qin Lai was silent. The two of them looked at each other and revealed a meaningful smile at the same time. Mo Xiaobao happily pounced on Qin Lai, using all his strength to ravage that exquisite face that was exactly the same as his own. "Good brother, I knew that you would also find it fun. That was why it was said that those who were able to mingle in Ding Prince Fu and still be able to mingle well were all not good people." Just as Mo Xiaobao finished discussing with Qin Lai, a flurry of footsteps came from outside. Even though there were many guards in the yard, they were usually very careful when moving. If Mo Xiaobao and Qin Lai didn't pay attention to the movements outside, they wouldn't be able to hear any footsteps. The only person who could leave so arrogantly was probably Mo Jingli. Mo Xiaobao glanced at Qin Lai and quickly jumped onto the roof beam, disappearing into an inconspicuous hole above the beam. Just as Xiaobao disappeared, the door to the room was kicked open from the outside. The child who had been sleeping on the bed was startled by the loud noise. He pursed his lips and began to cry loudly again. Qin Lai felt cold sweat drip down his back as he watched the child cry his heart out. He really didn't know how to coax children. Just now this little ancestor was coaxed to sleep by Xiaobao. "Shut up." Mo Jingli's entire body was filled with a low pressure as he roared coldly. Qin Lai rolled his eyes. "If you have the ability, come and coax her. Are you crazy? Don't you know that children are hard to coax?" Mo Jingli had just suffered a great loss at the hands of Mo Shuyao. Now that he was being mocked by Qin Lai, his expression became even uglier. Mo Jingli charged forward and grabbed Qin Lai. His expression was cold as he said, "Do you want to die?" Qin Lai unceremoniously raised his hand and stabbed towards Mo Jingli's eyes. Mo Jingli quickly raised his other hand to block. Qin Lai flipped in the air and kicked away Mo Jingli's hand. He retreated a few steps and stood firmly. He raised his chin and stared at Mo Jingli provocatively. Qin Lai's beautiful counterattack caused Mo Jingli's expression to become even uglier. Even though he wasn't worried that this brat would rebel, but Mo Xuyao's son was already so strong at such a young age and his only son was. Qin Lai snorted and said, "Do you dare to kill me? If you kill this prince, then you can just wait to die." Mo Jingli's expression was ferocious. "Even if I die, it's not bad to have you accompany me in death. I want to see if Mo Xuyao and Yi Li will feel heartache after losing a son." Qin Lai clapped his hands and laughed. "Ioyo, Emperor Chu is really ambitious. So your dream is to see my royal father and mother feel heartache. So what? Even if you kill me, this world will still belong to my royal father. I still have my younger brother and sister. My royal father and mother will still live peacefully in the future. This prince feels that having Emperor Chu accompany me in death is not bad. Who knows? If my royal father gets angry, he can even send a few more people to accompany me in death. For example, Mo Siyun and maybe even Mo Suiyun. Exchanging 3 generations of Emperor Chu for this prince is still worth it. You really aren't afraid of death?" Mo Jingli stared at Qin Lai and asked. Qin Lai smiled and said, "I should be a little better than Emperor Chu. Emperor Chu, you can try and see if you can still walk out of Glass City after killing this prince. Oh, there's also the Southern Zhao prince. Maybe you can use him as a bargaining chip." Mo Jingli's expression was still ugly, but the killing intent on his body was gradually retracting. He was very clear in his heart that the Southern Zhao prince could only be used as a bargaining chip when it wasn't important. If he really killed Mo Xuyao, a Southern Zhao prince definitely wouldn't be able to offset Mo Xuyao's anger. With a cold snort, Mo Jingli finally left in a huff. "You stay with me obediently. I can't kill you right now, but that doesn't mean I can't cripple you. This prince is so scared," Qin Lai said without much sincerity. Qin Lai said without much sincerity. He didn't pay attention to the angry Mo Jingli who left in a hurry. He walked to the bedside and clumsily coaxed the sobbing baby. In the Prince Ding mansion, Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li weren't in a hurry to find Emo Xiaobao. The matter this time was originally a trial for Emo Jingli. Otherwise, if they wanted to kill Emo Jingli, it wouldn't have needed to be so complicated. It would have been done long ago. In a dark prison cell in the prince's mansion, Emo Xiaoyao sat silently on a large chair. He looked at Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li who sat opposite him, and his heart was slightly uneasy. After a while he couldn't help but ask, "Are you really not worried about the little prince's safety?" Emo Xiaoyao glanced at him before lowering his head to continue reading the file in his hands. He calmly said, "If he was so easily injured by Emo Jingli, he doesn't deserve to be the heir of Prince Ding." Emo Jingyu frowned. He had personally seen Emo Xiaobao being drugged and then taken away by Emo Jingli. However, Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's calmness made him feel that something was wrong. There weren't any parents in the world who wouldn't worry about their children's safety, unless they were certain that their children weren't in danger. "The prince is really in Emo Jingli's hands," Emo Jingyu said. Emo Xiaoyao nodded. "I know this. Otherwise, why do you think I let Emo Jingli leave? I don't have any interest in this right now. Emo Jingyu, tell I the locations of all the Dechu state and Emo Jingli's strongholds in Glass City." Emo Jingyu was startled. In a low voice he said, "This matter has nothing to do with the Dechu state. Cooperating with Emo Jingli is I's own matter." Emo Xiaoyao raised his brows and smiled. "You don't need to explain this to I. I want you to know the locations of all the Dechu state's royal family and Emo Jingli's strongholds, as well as the names of their spies. How many spies and secret forces were hidden in the Dechu state's royal family? Even the Prince Ding mansion didn't know everything. If it weren't for these forces, Emo Jingli wouldn't have been able to cause so much trouble in Glass City." Chapter 1094. I am only a prince of the imperial family. Only Emo Jingli himself knows these things, Emo Jingli said. Emo Xiaoyao shook his head, not believing his words at all. He smiled. "But I feel that there are many things that even Emo Jingli doesn't know about. The one who truly knows should be the Empress Dowager. And this time it's impossible for the Empress Dowager to not tell you at all about your visit to Glass City." Emo Jingyu was startled, lowering his eyes in silence. Emo Xiaoyao leisurely leaned against the couch, calmly saying, "When Emo Jingli was still alive, he had planted many spies in the northwest. Naturally, Emo Jingli wouldn't know about these things. But the Empress Dowager definitely knows. Originally, I didn't plan to pay attention to it. After all, there are no walls in this world that don't have cracks. Even if I get rid of these spies, there will always be people who will sharpen their heads and dig in. But this time, Emo Jingli's incident taught I a very important lesson. Being soft-hearted will only bring about big trouble. So I decided to clean up those bugs, spray them with insecticide water and set them on fire. Perhaps they won't grow in the future." Emo Jingyu's lips couldn't help but twitch. "You call this being soft-hearted? Everyone in the world is a living Buddha. From the start, did you want to dig out Dechu State's spies in the northwest, or did you want to capture Emo Jingli?" After a long time, Emo Jingyu finally asked. Emo Xiaoyao rubbed his chin, calmly asking, "Why can't I think of both? That old witch from Dechu State sure has guts. Using this to negotiate with I? The Mahist army can't attack Jiangnan for 20 years? How did she come up with such a cute condition?" Emo Jingyu finally understood that all these unlucky matters originated from the Empress Dowager's own decision. He didn't know that the Empress Dowager had proposed such a condition to Emo Xiaoyao. It was obvious that the Empress Dowager was still on guard against him. Sighing, Emo Jingyu said, "I don't know about this. The Empress Dowager didn't even tell me about this. Do you think I would know about the list of Dechu State spies in the northwest?" Emo Xiaoyao sneered, "If you didn't know, would you dare to make this trip?" Emo Jingyu fell silent again. After a long time, he raised his head and asked, "What benefits will I get if I tell you?" Emo Xiaoyao looked at him with a radiant smile. "You don't have to be tortured." Emo Jingyu shook his head. "No, you have to guarantee my safety. Although I agreed to help Emo Jingli, I didn't actually do anything. So, it shouldn't be considered as offending the Prince Ding mansion, right? I can tell you where the little heir is, but you have to guarantee my safety and let me leave the northwest." Emo Xiaoyao looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "You didn't do anything? Forcing the Dechu State's little emperor to trick Emo Xiaobao out, does that count as doing something?" Emo Jingyu's eyes widened. How did you? Emo Xiuyao waved his hand and the door to the nearby prison opened. An 11 or 12-year-old youth wearing a bright yellow dragon robe walked in. Looking at Emo Jingyu, he softly called, Uncle Yu. Emo Jingyu stared at Emo Xiuyao in disbelief. It was you who told Emo Xiuyao? Just by looking at Emo Sueyun's appearance he knew that he didn't suffer much. In other words, the people from the Prince Ding mansion didn't force him. He even saw a hint of joy and schadenfreude in Emo Sueyun's eyes. Emo Jingyu couldn't help but think that perhaps he had always underestimated this unremarkable little emperor. Emo Sueyun blinked, looking at Emo Jingyu with some grievance. Uncle Yu, I'm very sorry. I don't want to die and I don't want to die with you. I'm very scared of Uncle Prince Ding. Haven't you always told me that Uncle Prince Ding is very powerful? Then why did you still want me to capture his son? I'll die. Emo Jingyu was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. How could he not see that this kid was simply pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Emo Jingyu gritted his teeth. Emo Sueyun, do you know what you're doing? Emo Sueyun hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Emo Xiuyao lazily said, this child knows what he's doing better than you. How do you think I knew what you were going to do tonight? How did Xinyang not know about the ice magnolia in the main hall? It was you. Although he knew that he had been betrayed by Emo Sueyun, Emo Jingyu still didn't dare to believe that Emo Sueyun had started to collude with the Prince Ding mansion so early. You cooperating with the Prince Ding mansion, aren't you afraid of asking a tiger for its skin? Emo Sueyun looked up at Emo Jingyu saying seriously, Uncle Yu, if I didn't cooperate with the Prince Ding mansion, I might have already died. If I cooperate with Uncle Prince Ding I'll still have a chance to live. Only by living can I have a chance to turn the tables. After taking a deep look at Emo Sueyun, Emo Jingyu finally fell back into his chair powerlessly, looking as though he had nothing to say. Emo Xiuyao waved his hand, signaling for someone to bring Emo Sueyun back. The prison cell quieted down again. Emo Xiuyao looked at Emo Xiuyao and Yili, saying with a bitter smile, Prince Ding is indeed a good schemer. He can play everyone in the world in the palm of his hand. Emo Xiuyao slightly raised his eyebrows, not saying anything. Emo Jingyu looked at him and said, from the start, you knew that Emo Jingli wanted to make a move on Prince Ding. And you knew what he wanted to do. Prince Ding being captured so easily by Emo Jingli was probably part of his plan, right? After suddenly realizing that everything was in the palm of someone else's hand, Emo Jingyu became clear-headed instead. He suddenly recalled that when Emo Xiuyao's corpse came back to life, Emo Jingli and Lei Jinting did not see any clues. His heart sank and he said, the one captured by Emo Jingli was not the prince at all. No parents would be able to remain so calm and collected when their son was taken away, even if there were countless people secretly protecting him. Emo Xiuyao sighed softly, looking at Emo Jingyu with some regret. Emo Jingyu, you've always been a smart person. It's a pity. You did a foolish thing in Ai's territory. I really had no choice but to take action against you. What benefits did Emo Jingli give you to dare to go against Ai? Emo Jingyu's face was pale. He closed his eyes and said in a low voice, the Imperial Jade Seal. The Imperial Jade Seal? Emo Xiuyao raised his brows with interest. He turned to look at Yili and asked, Li, do you like the Imperial Jade Seal? Yili looked at him with a smile. The Imperial Jade Seal? What use does it have? It doesn't seem to have any use. Emo Xiuyao was silent for a moment. It's just a bit bigger than the Prince Ding Mansion's seal. Yili shook her head. If you think it's too small, you can carve the 9 dragons seal onto the Prince Ding Mansion's handwriting. Emo Xiuyao nodded in agreement. He had no interest in the Imperial Jade Seal, and the one in Emo Jingli's hand could not be called the Imperial Jade Seal. At most, it could only be considered the Dechu State's Imperial Jade Seal. If he was interested, he could directly establish a country and take the throne. He could find any piece of jade and carve a Imperial Jade Seal for generations to come. Emo Xiuyao's smile was somewhat bitter. Not everyone had Emo Xiuyao's ability and boldness. For someone who had ambitions for the throne, the Imperial Jade Seal was definitely an irresistible temptation. Moreover, Emo Jingli's conditions were far more than just the Imperial Jade Seal. He had no choice but to agree. Chapter 1095. Emo Xiuyao looked at him and calmly said, a mere Imperial Jade Seal shouldn't give you the courage to go against Ai. Is there anything else? Emo Xiao did not speak. It was not that he still wanted to deny it to Emo Xiao, but he really could not say it. If he said it, he would only die. Seeing his stubborn appearance, Emo Xiao coldly laughed and said, "You think that if you don't say it, I won't be able to find out?" Emo Jingyu's face paled. He finally lowered his head and said hoarsely, "Prince, since you already know, why ask?" Emo Xiao stared at him and said, "I just don't understand. As a member of the imperial family of the Dechu state, why would you sell your country for a mere few 100,000 taels of silver? In those 2 years, at least half of the people who were massacred in the north should be counted on your head, right?" Emo Jingyu's face was deathly pale. His lips trembled slightly. He closed his eyes for a long time before sighing and saying, "For what? I also don't know why. Perhaps it was to fight for some dignity. Clearly they are all father's sons. Emo Jingqi and Emo Jingli, that idiot, ruined the Dechu state, but they still took turns to hold the power. Even if Emo Jingqi was killed by Emo Jingli, compared to letting outsiders like us hold the power, the Empress Dowager would still rather put her son under house arrest. They schemed against each other for the sake of power, while we who worked hard for the Dechu state had a noble status on the surface, but in reality, we couldn't even afford to buy a small toy. This kind of life, didn't Prince Ding also experience it? If not for the Prince Ding mansion's wealth, what kind of life would Prince Ding have had in those years? You think that you are smarter than Emo Jingqi and Emo Jingli? Emo Xiao coldly laughed and asked. Emo Jingyu raised his hand to cover his eyes, saying sadly, "At first I thought so. Well, I also don't know." He was not a deranged traitor. His moment of confusion back then had created an irreversible mistake. By the time he came to his senses, the Dechu state had already moved south. These years he had assisted Emo Jingli with great care. Unfortunately, because of his imperial status, Emo Jingli had always been on guard against him. And now, someone finally came to settle this score? For a moment, Emo Jingyu appeared disheartened. He looked up at Emo Xiao and said, "I'll tell you everything you want to know. How you want to punish me? Up to you. Only, my children are still in Dechu state. I hope that the Prince Ding mansion can guarantee their safety. I don't ask for glory and wealth, I only ask for their safety." After saying these words, Emo Jingyu seemed to have aged several years. Emo Xiao was silent for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Emo Jingyu understood Emo Xiao. Although he was crafty and cunning, making his enemies gnash their teeth in hatred. But when he made a promise, he always kept it. Emo Jingyu nodded and said, "Bring me a pen and paper. I can only tell you what I know, but the Empress Dowager may not tell me everything." After a moment, Emo Xiao and Yi Li left the prison cell with the information Emo Jingyu provided. In the prison cell, Emo Jingyu was still sitting on the large chair. His entire body was motionless, as though he had lost all signs of life. Emo Jingyu's fate had long been decided. Regardless of whether it was Emo Xiao or the Prince Ding mansion, traitors who betrayed the country were severely punished. Whether he confessed or not, only death awaited him. But now no one cared whether he lived or died. This night seemed to be extremely long. In a place where the citizens who were immersed in joy did not know, a bloody storm was secretly brewing. The hidden forces that Emo Jingli had been secretly proud of and relied on were removed one by one. The next day, many people would discover that the people who had been living by their side had suddenly disappeared without a trace. From then on, they would never be able to find any traces of them. At this time, Emo Xiaobao naturally did not know that while he was racking his brains on how to play with Emo Jingli, his father had already finished many things. At this time, Emo Xiaobao was lying on the roof with a smile, peeking down through the cracks in the roof. Daring to climb onto the roof of a person whose martial arts were not low in this heavily guarded place, it was enough to show that Emo Xiaobao had quite a bit of confidence in his qinggong. The shadow guards who were secretly protecting him were willing to let him climb onto Emo Jingli's roof, proving that they were quite confident in their prince's ability. At this time, Emo Xiaobao had a sinister smile on his face as he stared at the furious man below. Everything in the room had been smashed clean. He originally wanted to viciously slap Emo Xiaoyao's face and even take his life, but in the end it did not go as he wished. Instead he became a joke. How could Emo Jingli not be angry? After venting his anger, Emo Jingli finally calmed down a little and said in a deep voice, "Bring wine." Not long later, someone came in with wine and placed it on the table. Mo Jingli looked at the guard who brought the wine in with annoyance and said in a deep voice, "Get out." Ever since he was injured by Mo Xiuyao in Liang, Mo Jingli did not like to interact with others. Other than when it was necessary, he usually brought himself alone. This naturally made the people around him feel strange. After all, although Mo Jingli was not considered a pervert in the past, the number of women by his side was not small. However, they had been on the run all this time, so Mo Jingli's lack of interest in women did not attract too much attention. Mo Jingli sat at the table and poured a cup of wine into his mouth. The burning sensation of the strong wine made his eyes a little bloodshot. Tonight's huge defeat and the faint fear in his heart made him unable to resist pouring cup after cup of wine into his mouth. On the roof, Mo Xiaobao smelled the pungent smell of wine and wrinkled his nose. He smiled and took out an extremely small pill, crushed it into powder and threw it in through the cracks of the roof. The light powder casually floated, some landing in the wine cup, some landing on Mo Jingli's body. Mo Xiaobao frowned in disappointment and helplessly sighed. If he directly threw the pill into Mo Jingli's wine, it would definitely be discovered by Mo Jingli. Although it would not be easily discovered if he crushed it into powder, he was afraid that the medicinal effect would not be enough. In fact, if it was not for Mo Jingli's irritation that made him pour down the wine, he was afraid that the powder he scattered would be discovered by others. Reality was like this. Mo Xiaobao could only helplessly accept it. He looked at Mo Jingli below and quietly left the roof. Not long later, the originally quiet courtyard suddenly became lively. For some reason, a fire suddenly appeared in the backyard. Originally, a fire was not a big deal, but at this very sensitive time, any abnormality could attract the shadow guards of the Prince Ding mansion. The entire courtyard became a mess. Other than the guards at the door, everyone else was busy putting out the fire and looking for traces. Mo Jingli, who had been drinking, suddenly heard the noise and became even more displeased. He abruptly opened the door and walked out, shouting sternly, "What's going on?" A guard hurriedly came forward to report. "Reporting to Your Highness, the backyard suddenly caught on fire." Chapter 1096. Fire in the backyard? Mo Jingli frowned and quickly reacted. He rushed to Qin Lai's room. He kicked the door open. Sure enough, it was empty inside. There was no trace of Qin Lai. "Idiot! Go and find him." Mo Jingli turned back and slapped the guard behind him, roaring. This was Glass City, the Prince Ding mansion. As long as they got out of this small courtyard, it was as difficult as ascending to the sky for them to catch Mo Yuchen again. After thinking about it, Mo Jingli decided to leave this place as soon as possible. Outside the small courtyard, Mo Xiaobao and Qin Lai handed the sleeping little prince of Nanzhao to Leng Junhan and Su Jirui, who had been waiting outside. They ordered them to send the little guy back to the Prince Ding mansion. Su Jirui grabbed Mo Xiaobao, who was about to escape, and asked, "Where are you going?" Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, "Watch the show. There's nothing for us to do." He lit a fire and informed the shadow guard of the Prince Ding mansion of Mo Jingli's exact location. Then the task was completed. His royal father couldn't possibly expect a 10-year-old child to destroy Mo Jingli, could he? Since there's nothing else, let's go back to the Prince Ding mansion together, Su Jirui said seriously. How could that be? Mo Xiaobao was shocked. Before Su Jirui reacted, he had jumped a few feet away. He smiled and said to Su Jirui, "Cousin Jirui, I still have something to do. You and little dummy Leng send this kid back to Aunt Anshi. This is an order." After that, Mo Xiaobao didn't wait for Su Jirui's answer. He directly jumped over the wall and disappeared in the alley again. Qin Lai held a little face that was exactly the same as Mo Xiaobao's. He patted Su Jirui and said, "Don't worry, I'll look after him." After that, he also jumped over the wall. The fair and tender Leng Xiaodai was still fair and tender in a black night suit. She glanced at the gloomy Su Jirui carefully and asked in a low voice, "What should we do?" Su Jirui glanced at the baby in Leng Junhan's hand worriedly and said in a low voice, "Guards." A man in black appeared behind Su Jirui. "Young master." Su Jirui waved his hand and said, "Send Junhan and the little prince of Nanzhao back to the Prince Ding mansion." After saying that, he also jumped over the wall. Although he came from a scholarly family, Su Jirui's qigong was still very impressive. In the alley, only the shadow guard and Leng Junhan were left looking at each other. After a while, Lung Junhan put the child in the hands of the shadow guard and said, "Uncle?" The shadow guard silently rolled his eyes. "I know. Send the little prince of Nanzhao back to the Prince Ding mansion." Lung Junhan nodded with satisfaction and followed him to climb the wall. Soon, only the shadow guard was left in the dark alleyway, holding the baby in his arms as he silently stared at the empty wall. It was slightly bleak. In the darkness, two tall and handsome men stood on the roof, looking at the scene below with amusement. Han Mingxi pointed at the shadow guard holding the baby and laughed until he was convulsing. "Brother, our little heir and these little rascals are very interesting." Beside him, young Master Mingyu was leaning against the roof. The faint moonlight shone on his handsome face, reflecting a faint smile. He looked at Han Mingxi and said, "The heir's qing gong is very good. You must have put in a lot of effort." The smile on Han Mingxi's face instantly froze. He laughed dryly and looked at his elder brother. He didn't know how his elder brother could tell that the little heir's qing gong was taught by him. There was clearly no trace of him. Young Master Feng Yu's unique qing gong was indeed very good, but his reputation back then wasn't that good either. Although no one mentioned the name of young Master Feng Yu in these years, Han Mingxi still didn't want his reputation to affect Mo Xiaobao negatively. So when Mi Xiaobao came to ask for guidance on qing gong, Han Mingxi specially improved his own qing gong quite a bit. It was a pity that Han Mingxi didn't know that a few years later, a certain someone's reputation in the pugilistic world would only be worse than his. It would be a waste of young Master Feng Yu's efforts. Han Mingyue shook his head and smiled as he looked at the lonely shadow guard below. "You're right. These little rascals are quite interesting. They will definitely become the little heir's confidants and most trusted brothers in the future." The friendship between these children easily reminded him of the friendship he had with Mo Shuyao when he was young. Although they were already older than these children when they first met, their relationship was truly closer than that of real brothers. It was a pity. Han Mingxi also knew that his elder brother was thinking of something. He went up and patted Han Mingyue's shoulder. "Elder brother, it's all in the past. Didn't Mo Shuyao no longer blame you?" Han Mingyue smiled and nodded. He stood up and said, "Let's go and take a look. They're still children after all. Don't let anything happen to them." Prince Ding said that there's no need to care about them if their lives aren't in danger. "I know. I also want to see how the little heir is going to torment Mo Jingli." Han Mingyue felt that Mo Jingli's smile was a little strange when he left. He secretly prayed for Mo Jingli in his heart. Glass City was neither big nor small. It might be easy to find a group of people, but it wasn't easy to find a single person, especially at night without alerting the commoners. Mo Jingli quickly sensed that there was something wrong with the fire in the small courtyard. In addition, with the disappearance of Mo Xiaobao and Nanzhao's little heir, he immediately understood that their residence had been exposed. He did not stay any longer. He only brought his two most trusted subordinates and left the small courtyard in the midst of the chaos. However, they soon discovered one thing. The Great Chu's spies in Glass City had all been uprooted in less than 2 hours. No matter if it was the De Chu State's imperial family that originally existed, or Mo Jingli's men that were planted after the Mahist army became independent, or Mo Jingli's own men. They were all under the control of the Prince Ding mansion. Moreover, Mo Shuyao did not seem to care that Mo Jingli knew this news. Everywhere they went, they saw the Prince Ding mansion's soldiers eyeing them covetously. Thus he had no choice but to flee once again. After busying himself for nearly 2 hours and running through the entire Glass City, he couldn't even find a place to stay. Instead, he was so tired that he was panting. It was already close to midnight. In the end, Mo Jingli was forced into a corner and decided to risk it all. He headed in the direction of the Prince Ding mansion. At this time, Mo Xiaobao, Qin Lai, and the others were also panting as they ran through Glass City. Little heir Mo flew into a rage when he accidentally lost track of Mo Jingli. "We're going to die anyway. Why are we running so fast? What do we do now? Where are we going to find him?" After playing for an entire night, the tired Lung Junhan was a little dispirited. "We're going to die anyway. Even if I'm Mo Jingli, I have to run faster." Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and turned to look at Qin Lai. Qin Lai shrugged, indicating that he also did not know where Mo Jingli ran off to. Mo Xiaobao was a little aggrieved. If he could not mess with Mo Jingli, he would die a horrible death. "Yo, little heir, why are you still outside so late?" A laughing voice came from the top of the wall. The four looked up and saw Han Mingxi sitting leisurely on the wall, smiling at them. Mo Xiaobao's eyes lit up. Uncle Han, do you know where Mo Jingli ran off to? Chapter 1097. Han Mingxi tilted his head to look at him. Uncle Han, is the little heir calling me? I'm really overwhelmed by your favor. Mo Xiaobao had no qualms about acting spoiled. He directly jumped onto the wall and sat beside Han Mingxi. He smiled and said, Uncle Han, you're the best. Why are you here so late at night? You must have seen where Mo Jingli ran to, right? Han Mingxi looked at him with a smile. So what if I saw him? Mo Xiaobao looked at him anxiously. His clear eyes were filled with the words seeking an answer. Han Mingyue helplessly rubbed his little head and said, he went in the direction of the Prince Ding mansion. Prince Ding mansion? Mo Xiaobao frowned. Isn't he seeking death by running to the Prince Ding mansion now? It's good that it's night now. In another 2 hours it will be daybreak. At that time he'll still be dead. Han Mingyue appeared on the wall. She looked at Mo Xiaobao and smiled faintly. Since he's going to die either way, why not take a gamble? Mo Xiaobao tilted his little head and thought for a moment. He nodded and said, all right. I'll go back first. He hoped that Mo Jingli could hold on long enough to break into the Prince Ding mansion again. He nimbly jumped off the high wall. Mo Xiaobao pulled the other children and dashed in the direction of the Prince Ding mansion. He was afraid that Mo Jingli would be killed by his royal father if he was late. As he dashed, Mo Xiaobao took the time to think in his heart. Was the drug he had given her effective? Did it lose its effect after too long? Or was there really too little of it? It had no effect on Mo Jingli. Although it was already the middle of the night, the Prince Ding mansion was still brightly lit. In the main hall, the guests from various countries were still enjoying the dancing and drinking. The main hall was filled with singing and dancing. In any case, Prince Ding's intentions were clear. There would be a lot of things happening in Glass City tonight. If anything happened, he could only blame it on his own bad luck. In that case, why not just stay in the Prince Ding mansion, drink and make merry without caring about anything else? The Prince Ding mansion was responsible for their safety after all. Therefore, even when there were some accidents that happened to women, the envoys from various countries were still having a good time with each other. Father Mother Xiaobao is back. In the inner courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion, Xiaobao happily skipped into the reception pavilion and threw himself into Yi Li's arms. Mo Xiuyao, who was sitting by the side, frowned in displeasure. He lifted his hand and pulled Xiaobao out of Yi Li's arms. Look at how old you are. Why are you still throwing yourself into Li Li's arms? What if you hurt your mother? Mo Xiaobao struggled unhappily. I won't hurt mother. Xiaobao loves mother the most. Seeing her son come back safely, Yi Li also let out a sigh of relief. She hurriedly rescued her son from Mo Xiuyao's arms. She touched his little face and asked, where did Tian go? Are you hurt? Xiaobao disdainfully curled his lips and said, Mo Jingli, that idiot. He didn't even see this prince's face. How could he be hurt? But he ran away. Han Mingxi said that he ran to the Prince Ding mansion. Mother, did you kill him already? Yi Li helplessly sighed and said, he hasn't come yet. You've done very well. Mother and father will take care of the rest. You just have to be obedient. Xiaobao shook his head. No, I must see Mo Jingli. Did the medicine in his body have any effect? Mo Xiuyao sat by the side looking at his son critically. He said to Yi Li, Li, don't comfort him. What did he do well? He's already in front of us and he still let Mo Jingli run away. If we knew earlier, we would have killed Mo Jingli in the mansion. Now we can rest in peace. Xiaobao was furious. It's clearly your shadow guard that came too late. Do you think this prince can beat Mo Jingli and his many guards? Xiaobao compared his height and then faked a height, glaring angrily at Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao snorted in disdain. Even if you can't beat him, can't you capture him with your wits? I wasn't much taller than you when I went to the battlefield at 14. These words weren't false. Xiaobao had grown crazily in this half a year, to the point where his originally round face had disappeared. Although he was only 11 years old compared to a normal 13 or 14-year-old child, he wasn't shorter. Capture him with my wits? Xiaobao frowned and began to consider this possibility. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't have a way to capture Mo Jingli, but at that time he was in the mood to play and didn't consider that there was a more efficient way. Carefully glancing at Emo Xiuyao, Xiaobao blinked his large eyes and said shyly, "But, father said, wouldn't that be fun?" Emo Xiuyao looked at Xiaobao with disappointment, saying, "Idiot. You wouldn't have." Prince Ding rarely whispered in his son's ear. The more Xiaobao listened, the brighter his eyes became. At the side, Yili only felt her eyelids twitching. Just by looking at Xiaobao's evil smile that made people unable to look at him, she knew that Emo Xiuyao definitely didn't teach him anything good. Unable to continue watching, Yili gave a light snort. One adult and one child quickly sat down obediently and looked at Yili. Yili sighed and said to Emo Xiuyao, "Don't teach him any nonsense, he's still a child." Emo Xiuyao smiled at Yili. "I know, Li, I didn't teach him any nonsense." It was rare for father and son to be on the same side. Xiaobao nodded heavily. And father is teaching son how to deal with bad people. Bad people. Emo Xiuyao secretly waved his hand at Xiaobao. Xiaobao immediately understood. "Mother, son is tired and will go to sleep first. Good night, mother." After saying that, Xiaobao rushed out like a gust of wind. Emo Xiuyao looked at Yili with a smile, smiling innocently. "Xiaobao's qinggong is really good. Lili, I didn't teach him that." Looking at his innocent smile, Yili helplessly sighed. "I heard what you said to him. Saying that it was a mess was being polite. What kind of father would teach his son to use those low-class methods to deal with the enemy?" Emo Xiuyao smiled wholeheartedly. Methods and methods are divided into useful and useless, not high-class and low-class. At Xiaobao's age he can't be compared to Emo Jingli at all. If he can't beat Emo Jingli, then even high-class methods are useless. The future heir of the Prince Ding mansion definitely couldn't be a noble and modest gentleman. Princess consort. The Queen of Nanzhao and Genom of Gojoseon of Xiling request an audience. Outside the door, Qin Feng reported in a low voice. Emo Xiuyao nodded. "Let them in." After a while, Princess Anqi and the others walked in together. Princess Anqi was holding the little prince in her arms, her beautiful face full of love and joy. Yili smiled at the three people. "It's so late, why are you all here?" Lei Tingfeng looked at Yili and her husband, then looked at Princess Anqi and her husband, smiling. "Everyone hasn't rested yet. I can't stand the alcohol, so I came out for a walk. I happened to meet the Queen of Nanzhao and her husband. I heard that they came to request an audience with the prince and princess consort, so I also came to ask for a cup of tea." "Princess consort, please don't blame me." Yili smiled. "Genom of Gojoseon is too polite, please sit." Then she ordered someone to serve tea. Chapter 1098. Princess Anqi didn't let go of the child for even a moment. She had lost and found her son again. Princess Anqi, who had always been strong, almost burst into tears. Yili looked at Princess Anqi with a smile and asked, "How is the little prince?" Princess Anqi nodded. "Sure is fine. We came over to thank the little prince." "Is the little prince back?" Yili smiled. "He had a wild day outside. He went back to his room to rest." Princess Anqi nodded regretfully and said with a smile, "I'll thank the crown prince personally today." Yili looked at the baby in Princess Anqi's arms, who was looking at her curiously with his big round eyes. She smiled. "Can I hold the child?" Princess Anqi gently placed the child in Yili's arms. The baby looked at Yili with his big eyes. He didn't cry. Princess Anqi couldn't help but smile. This child, he's become bolder after going out. He used to be very shy with strangers. Speaking of this, Princess Anqi felt sad when she thought of how her son had suffered in the past few days. Newborns weren't like older children. Even if he had suffered, he couldn't say it out loud. This made people worry and feel sorry for him. Yili looked at Princess Anqi and comforted her softly. "The little prince looks fine. Did you get someone to check on him?" Princess Anqi nodded. Sir Xinyang personally checked on Shuo. "There's no problem. He might have been shocked. He'll be fine in a few days." "Good." Lei Tingfeng, who had been sitting next to them, looked at Yili and Emo Xiuyao in surprise. "The little prince brought back the Nanzhao prince?" Emo Xiuyao smiled carelessly. "That kid was fooling around. Coincidentally, Emo Jingli put the little prince with him. He set a fire and took advantage of the chaos to bring the little prince back." Emo Xiuyao said it so casually as though Emo Xiaobao was just fooling around and leaving after setting a fire. However, Lei Tingfeng and the others understood how difficult it was for an 11-year-old child to set a fire under Mo Jingli's heavy guard and escape. Other things aside, if it was a child of this age from an ordinary family, they would probably be unable to do anything but cry. The little prince is so promising at such a young age. Like father like son. Lei Tingfeng praised. Princess Anxi and Pu An nodded in agreement. They were extremely grateful to Mo Xiaobao for saving their son. Lei Tingfeng sipped his tea and asked casually, Prince Ding, Princess Consort, I wonder if Mo Jingli? Hearing Lei Tingfeng's question, Princess Anxi and Pu An couldn't help but look at Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao. Once bitten, twice shy. To them, Mo Jingli was already a target that had to be eradicated immediately. Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. Someone will take over soon. Lei Tingfeng raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiuyao in disbelief. With Prince Ding and Princess Consort's abilities, Mo Jingli can't jump around so easily. Mo Xiuyao smiled. He's just a clown. Genom of Gojoseon doesn't need to care about him. This kind of small matter can be left to Mo Yuchen to deal with. If I get involved, it will seem like I'm bullying others. It wasn't that Prince Ding had no experience in bullying others with his power. However, when it came to bullying someone like Mo Jingli, Prince Ding still felt that it was a little inferior. A trace of surprise flashed through Lei Tingfeng's eyes. He didn't expect that the Prince Ding mansion had begun to cultivate the ability of the crown prince so early. Because in Lei Tingfeng's view, although Mo Xiuyao might be a very strict father, Yi Li was definitely a soft-hearted mother who loved her child. Thinking of how he was complacent under his father's wings when he was 20 years old, Lei Tingfeng could only shake his head secretly and feel ashamed of himself. Princess Anxi was also a person who began to deal with political affairs as the crown princess when she was a teenager. Naturally, she was not surprised by Mo Xiuyao's words. But because Mo Xiaobao saved her son, she was very grateful. The courtyard where Mo Xiaobao lived was in the southeast corner of the inner courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion. In order to let their son have enough private space, Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao put a large courtyard and a small garden in the mansion, which was second only to the main courtyard, into Mo Xiaobao's territory after he reached the age of living alone. They generally didn't care what Mo Xiaobao did or how he arranged it. The area of this courtyard was not inferior to the whole mansion of an ordinary rich family. There were many rooms. Many times Su Jirui, Leng Junhan and others would also stay here for a few days. When Mo Xiaobao returned to his courtyard, Leng Junhan and Su Jirui had already fallen asleep. They were the youngest and had been running around with Mo Xiuyao and Qin Lai for a whole day. They were already tired. As soon as they came back, they washed and went to bed. Mo Xiaobao didn't disturb them and went directly to his room. As soon as he opened the door, Mo Xiaobao was stunned. A cold and sharp thing was pointed at his waist. There was a strange osmanthus fragrance behind him. Mo Xiaobao wrinkled his nose. The smell was very familiar. Mo Jingli. A hand quickly pressed a few times on his body. Several important acupoints on Mo Xiaobao's body were sealed. Then a hand pulled him over. In the somewhat dark room, a tall and gloomy man was staring at him with malicious eyes. It was Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli dragged Mo Xiaobao, whose acupoints were sealed, into the inner room and lit a candlestick on the side. The room gradually brightened. Mo Xiaobao curiously looked at the man in front of him. He was wearing the costume of the shadow guard of the Prince Ding mansion. His overly pale face and gloomy eyes made him look like a ghost crawling out of hell. Mo Jingli, you're really capable. Mo Jingli stared at Mo Xiaobao and gloomily said. Mo Xiaobao shrugged and said with a smile, you're not bad either. You were actually able to silently sneak into this Shizi's courtyard. Who helped you? With just you alone, you definitely don't have the ability to silently avoid the shadow guard of the mansion and enter this Shizi's courtyard. Mo Jingli smiled with a strange expression. Unfortunately, you'll never have the chance to know. Mo Xiaobao raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Jingli. I say. You're not planning to kill me right now, are you? He guessed right. Mo Jingli sneered. If I knew you were so cunning, I would have killed you directly when I caught you. It would have saved me so much effort. Mo Xiaobao's face suddenly drooped. Even if you kill me, you can't get out. Mo Jingli smiled. If I can get in, I can get out. Mo Xiaobao was silent for a long time. Finally, he helplessly sighed. You're right. Do it. If he didn't say so, Mo Jingli might have immediately done it. But since he said so, Mo Jingli hesitated and suspiciously stared at him. What conspiracy do you have? Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes. I'm about to die, what conspiracy can I have? Can I mourn for my short life? Chapter 1099. Mo Jingli was silent. Mo Xiaobao thought for a bit before raising his head and asking, right after I die, remember to stay away from me. No, remember to stay away from me. What do you mean? Mo Jingli said in a deep voice. Mo Xiaobao said with a bit of guilt, before in the small courtyard, did you drink a lot of wine? So what? He did drink a lot of wine, but that amount of wine was not enough to affect him. Mo Xiaobao tapped his fingers together. I was careless and added something into the wine. Maybe. I won't die so well. In short, you have to stay away from me. Seeing Mo Xiaobao's serious expression, Mo Jingli was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He roared in a low voice, Mo Yuchen. You can't blame me for this. Mo Xiaobao said seriously. What kind of drug did you give me? Mo Xiaobao shook his head and looked at him with sympathy. Since everyone is going to die, what kind of drug is not important, right? If you can kill yourself before the poison takes effect, it won't affect you at all. The irritable Mo Jingli suddenly stopped. He looked at Mo Xiaobao for a long time before laughing out loud. We forgot you, little brat. You're just as crafty as your father. I was almost fooled by you. Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and was not in a hurry. This one said, I only ask you to stay away from this one when you died. What kind of drug did you give me? Mo Jingli was furious. A person like Mo Jingli, what he lacked the most was the courage to go all out, so it was easy for him to be scared by some groundless things. If Mo Xiaobao directly told him what drug he gave him, he would not be so nervous. It was because of Mo Xiaobao's attitude that he felt uneasy. In one word, he was overthinking. Mo Xiaobao looked at him innocently, his eyes clearly saying, die early, reincarnate early. After staring at Mo Xiaobao for a long time, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with a bloody light. He finally made up his mind and pulled out a dagger to stab Mo Xiaobao in the chest. Since you don't want to talk, then keep it for yourself. Mo Jingli, are you looking for me? Ah, idiot, you can't even recognize people clearly, so what are you doing out here? A clear and cheerful voice sounded from outside the door, carrying with it countless malicious taunts. Mo Jingli was stunned and looked at the person in front of him in disbelief. Mo Xiaobao, who was forced to sit on the stool, squeezed out a helpless and bitter smile. I really don't know what drug he gave you. Also, my surname is not Mo. You are not Mo Yuchen. Little Mo shrugged. Why don't you go out and take a look? Mo Jingli grabbed Mo Xiaobao and carried him all the way to the door. Through the gap of the door, Mo Jingli could clearly see a handsome young man in black standing in the courtyard. He looked exactly the same as Mo Xiaobao in front of him. But under the moonlight, those eyes did not hide the disdain and gloating towards the people in the room. Qin Lai, you idiot, how did you get caught again? Mo Xiaobao in the courtyard shouted in a bad mood. Mo Xiaobao in Mo Jingli's hand rolled his eyes, also in a bad mood. Who did this to me? His mother. He just didn't have time to remove his makeup and change his clothes. He planned to wait for a certain person to come back and discuss how to take the next step. Mo Xiaobao rubbed his chin and nodded with a conscience. Okay, Mo Jingli, come out quickly. You can't run away if you hurt Qin Lai. Mo Jingli sneered. You come and change with him. Qin Lai rolled his eyes at him. Is your brain broken? Don't you know who I am? Do you think the Prince Ding mansion will use the heir to exchange for the life of a shadow guard? Although he obtained the qualifications to join Qilin, but before he completed the formal training he could only be a shadow guard. Thinking of this, Qin Lai was a bit sad. If he died like this and was not added as a Qilin member, he would not let Mo Xiaobao go even if he became a ghost. A certain person's resentment made Mo Xiaobao feel a chill at the back of his head. Rubbing his head, Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, That? I can't change people. How about I give you the antidote? What antidote? Mo Jingli stared at him vigilantly. After a while he sneered. What use do I have for the antidote now? Mo Xiaobao, who was rejected, looked at him faintly. You will regret it. Mo Jingli sneered. He did not answer and did not go out. Qin Lai was much shorter than him. Once he went out he would be attacked by the archers of the Mahist army. He would not even have a shield. But Mo Jingli also understood that it was not a good idea to waste time like this. the person in his hand was really Mo Jingli, he could die with him. But now it was an insignificant shadow guard, so Mo Jingli hesitated. Using his own life to exchange for the life of a shadow guard, Mo Jingli deeply felt that it was not worth it. In such a short time, Mo Xiuyao had arrived with the others. Seeing Mo Xiaobao standing in the yard with a sad and tangled face, Mo Xiuyao sneered. What, you failed again? Mo Xiaobao bit his cheeks and stared at his father fiercely. What did he mean by failed again? When did he Mo Yuchen fail? Yili raised her hand and stroked her son's little head. She frowned and said, Is Qin Lai inside? Mo Xiaobao nodded heavily. On the surface he looked relaxed, but in fact Mo Xiaobao was a little nervous. Who knew whether Mo Jingli, that madman, would take the risk to stab Qin Lai when he knew that there was no way out? Mo Xiuyao pulled Yili forward a few steps and said lightly, Mo Jingli, since you are already here, don't hide anymore. Come out. The person inside did not make a sound for a long time. But after a while, Mo Jingli's voice came from inside. Mo Xiuyao, do you think I am a fool? Mo Xiuyao could not help laughing out loud. Are you not a fool? I let you go, but you came back by yourself. Do you expect that I will let you go this time? Who gave you the confidence to think that you can hurt Ai's son in the Prince Ding mansion? Come out by yourself, I will let you die a little easier. In the room, Mo Jingli tightly held Qin Lai against the door. Qin Lai was a little uncomfortable. He moved uncomfortably and sighed, It's useless to hold me. I am just a shadow guard of the Crown Prince. Do you think the prince will let you live for me? Also, even if I let you go, the Crown Prince has poisoned you. You can't run far. Mo Jingli stared at him with a ferocious smile. Are you encouraging me to take you down with me? Qin Lai tactfully shut up. He didn't want to die. Even if he died, he didn't want to die together with Mo Jingli. Mo Xiuyao, tell all your archers to get away. For those holding hostages, the thing they were most afraid of was the archers hiding in the dark, making it impossible for them to guard against them. Especially the archers of the Prince Ding mansion, they are all excellent archers. Chapter 1100. Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and raised his hand. No problem. Why should I believe you? Mo Jingli asked suspiciously. Mo Xiuyao said impatiently, How would I know how to make you believe me? If you want to come out, then come out. If you don't want to come out, then forget it. Perhaps because he heard Mo Xiuyao's impatience, Mo Jingli finally relaxed a little. He had too little power in his hands. He only had a shadow guard impersonating the crown prince of the Prince Ding mansion, which was not enough to negotiate with Mo Xiuyao. Let me leave the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and said. Mo Xiuyao was immediately amused. He looked lazily at the closed door and laughed. Mo Jingli, do you think I am playing games with you? Or do you think I want to play a few games with you? Do you have that kind of value? After a while, the door was finally opened from the inside. Mo Jingli walked out with Qin Lai in his hand. Mo Jingli used one hand to hold Qin Lai in front of him, and the other hand held a dagger to Qin Lai's back. As long as there was any movement, he could be the first to stab the dagger into Qin Lai's back. Mo Xiuyao faintly glanced at Mo Jingli. Are you finally willing to come out? Now, what do you plan to do? Mo Jingli vigilantly looked at the group of people in the courtyard. Even if there were no archers, with these people alone, he would not be able to escape the Prince Ding mansion alive. In the candlelight he saw Mo Xiaobao standing beside Mo Xiuyao and Yili. As expected, he looked exactly the same as the person in front of him. But the light in the child's eyes made him certain that this child was the real crown prince of the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Yuchen. This was because the way this annoying brat looked at him was exactly the same as his father's when he was young. Mo Jingli grabbed Qin Lai and stared at Mo Xiuyao. If you don't want this brat to die, then back away. Mo Xiuyao's expression was calm. It was clear that he did not care about Mo Jingli's threat. What? Crown Prince? You are the same as your father. You don't care about this brat's life? He was caught because of you, right? Mo Jingli smiled maliciously at Mo Xiaobao. Seeing Qin Lai's pained expression, Mo Xiaobao's originally smiling face instantly turned serious. Glaring hatefully at Mo Jingli, he said, Let him go. Let me go. Mo Jingli said without hesitation, Impossible. Mo Xiaobao gritted his teeth. Seeing him angry, Mo Jingli's mood became better. Smiling, he said, Then you come over and exchange with him. Emo Xiaobao said in a clear voice. Everyone was stunned. Even Emo Jingli, who had proposed the condition, had said it with a hint of mockery. He had never thought that Emo Xiaobao would agree so readily. Crown Prince, please reconsider. The people beside Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li were shocked and quickly stopped him. In their eyes, 100 Qinlai's life was not as important as one Emo Xiaobao. It was not that they looked down on other people's lives, but in the eyes of anyone in the world, no one would think that a shadow guard's life was more precious than the future heir of the Prince Ding mansion. Emo Jingli was stunned. Cautiously looking at Emo Xiaobao, he said, "Are you serious?" Emo Xiaobao proudly raised his little chin and said, "Of course. If this crown prince is afraid of you, I'm not Emo Yuchen." Emo Jingli looked at Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li, who were standing to the side. In the crowd of people trying to persuade him, Emo Xiaobao's parents were especially quiet. "Mother." Emo Xiaobao looked up at Yi Li. Yi Li's lips curled into a faint smile. Rubbing Emo Xiaobao's little head, she said, "Xiaobao has grown up. You can make your own decision. You must be careful." Emo Xiaobao's little face lit up. Nodding heavily, he said, "This child knows. Thank you, mother." Saying this, Emo Xiaobao raised his hand towards Emo Jingli to indicate that he did not have any weapons on him. Then he slowly walked towards them. When he was 3 steps away from Emo Jingli, Emo Xiaobao stared at Emo Jingli and said, "Let go of Qinlai." With Emo Xiaobao as his hostage, Emo Jingli naturally did not care about Qinlai. Not to mention that he could not bring 2 hostages with him. Raising one hand, he pushed Qinlai out and his other hand grabbed at Emo Xiaobao. "Go die." Qinlai, who was pushed out, was not thrown out. Instead, he twisted his body and charged towards Emo Jingli. At the same time, Emo Xiaobao also threw a kick towards Emo Jingli's face. Emo Jingli was suddenly attacked, but he was not unprepared. With Emo Xiaobao's craftiness, Emo Jingli knew that he could not be caught so quickly. But he had to take a gamble. Otherwise, even if he had Qinlai, he would not be able to escape death. Therefore, when Emo Xiaobao kicked towards his face, Emo Jingli had already dodged to the side and once again grabbed at Emo Xiaobao's vital point. Qinlai's pressure point was blocked. Although he had opened it a little, it was not easy for him to have the strength to hit Emo Jingli. Very quickly he was kicked to the side by Emo Jingli. The shadow guard at the side quickly went forward to help him up and found that he was not heavily injured. Feng Jiao and the others who came over wanted to help Emo Xiaobao but were stopped by Emo Xiuyao. "Prince." Feng Jiao frowned, looking at Emo Xiuyao with disapproval. With Emo Xiaobao's martial arts, he was definitely not Emo Jingli's opponent. Emo Xiuyao calmly said, "Don't worry, let him try. If you guys were willing to fight with him normally, you wouldn't be so worried now." Emo Xiaobao was the heir of the Prince Ding mansion and had a high status. Although he was hardworking in martial arts, his status was different. No matter if it was a sparring partner or a professor, very few people dared to fight him seriously, much less risk their lives. This also led to Emo Xiaobao's lack of actual combat experience. In the past, Emo Xiuyao still had a few royal families that he didn't get along with, and he would occasionally beat them up. Since young, Emo Xiaobao could be said to have gotten whatever he wanted and everything went smoothly. Emo Xiaobao and Emo Jingli's fight could be said to be exciting. Although he was short and his internal energy was weak. But Emo Xiaobao, who had been in Qilin for a long time and had a slightly skewed worldview, was ruthless and cunning. There was no sign of nervousness or restraint from fighting for the first time. With this kind of performance, if he was 2 years older, people would believe that he killed people like flies. Lei Tingfeng, who was standing at the side, could not help but sigh in admiration as he watched Emo Xiaobao's performance. With a son like this, the Prince Ding mansion would not decline for the next 50 years. "Prince, are we raising the heir or raising assassins?" "The little heir's martial arts. Why does it look like he's even more ruthless than those people from the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce?" Feng Jiao lamented. The assassins from the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce were only ruthless. But their little heir's moves were not only ruthless, but also very wretched. Feng Jiao could not bear to look at him directly. "You're just an 11 or 12-year-old kid, yet you're using moves like monkey steals peach. Are you really a man?" Emo Xiuyao was not offended at all. "It's fine as long as he can beat him. When his martial arts are high enough, he'll naturally correct himself. Who like to use these wretched moves? Wouldn't this make his abilities even worse?" When his martial arts were high enough to kill everyone with Emo Xiaobao's arrogant personality, he would naturally choose to use more honorable moves. Feng Jiao shook his head and sighed. If the Su family knew, they would definitely be heartbroken. Half of Emo Xiaobao's education was the responsibility of the Su family. Even if they could not produce a young master like young Master Qingchen, they should at least produce a cultured and refined gentleman, right? Chapter 1101. Emo Shuyao scoffed, "It's better to raise a child like a wolf than a sheep. I don't have the mood to follow behind him and clean up his mess." What Emo Xiaobao had to do in the future wasn't as simple as just defending the city. If he was too naive and came to bother him all day long, he would only want to beat him to death. Although Emo Xiaobao tried his best, the difference in strength was too big. Finally, he was beaten to the point where he couldn't withstand Emo Jingli's attacks. Emo Xiaobao didn't care about his face and abandoned Emo Jingli without hesitation to run around the courtyard. At the start, Emo Jingli was still wary that Emo Shuyao and the others would suddenly make a move. But when he found out that Emo Shuyao had no intention of interfering, and that as long as he didn't try to escape from the Mahist army, the Shadow Guard would ignore him, Emo Jingli vented all his anger on Emo Xiaobao. Emo Xiaobao was chased all over the place. As he ran, he didn't forget to howl, "Mr. Shin, is your medicine expired? Ah 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 ah." Shin Yang, who was sleeping soundly in his own courtyard, turned in his sleep and muttered, "Little brat, when has this godly doctor's medicine ever expired?" While Emo Xiaobao was using Qinggong to run around. Just as he was thinking about whether he should put down his face and ask his father for help, he suddenly felt Emo Jingli's speed of chasing him suddenly slow down. Amidst the chaos, Emo Xiaobao turned back to look. Although he couldn't see Emo Jingli's face clearly because of the dark sky, he could clearly see that Emo Jingli's clothes were soaked in sweat. If Emo Xiaobao, who was being chased, didn't sweat, but the person chasing him was already drenched in sweat. This was clearly not logical. Emo Xiaobao's eyes turned and he took out something from his chest and grabbed it towards Emo Jingli. "Here's the antidote." Then with the fastest speed he pounced towards Emo Shuyao, who was watching the show from the side. After chasing Emo Xiaobao for a few laps, Emo Jingli clearly began to feel that something was wrong. A strange heat gradually surged up and slowly began to affect his body. At this moment he truly believed that Qin Lai hadn't lied to him. He really had been poisoned. So when Xiaobao shouted for the antidote, he paused for a moment and reached out to catch the thing that Xiaobao threw at him. By the time he realized that it was just a jade pendant that Emo Xiaobao had casually thrown over, Emo Xiaobao had already pounced into Emo Xuyao's arms. However, Emo Jingli did not have the time to care about Xiaobao's despicable actions because the strange poison had begun to take effect. At this time it had been 4 hours since he drank. He didn't feel it at all before, but now it was like a wildfire that became a prairie fire in a moment. For a moment, Emo Jingli was sweating profusely as if he had been soaked in water. Emo Jingli fell to the ground as if his body was being burned by a raging fire, and also as if there was a strange impulse and desire. These strange pains were stuck together, making him feel as if he was being bitten by insects. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to stare with their mouths agape. Their gazes towards Emo Xiaobao became strange. What kind of poison did you give him?" Feng Jiao asked with a frown. Looking at Emo Jingli's appearance, it didn't seem like he was in pain, or was it that his entire body didn't hurt? And what kind of poison was it that made him sweat without vomiting blood or bleeding from all orifices, and even had a ruddy complexion that didn't look like he was poisoned? Standing on the other side, Han Mingxi looked at Emo Jingli with pity, then looked at Emo Xiaobao, who was lying in Emo Xuyao's arms, and rubbed his nose. He decided to keep quiet. Emo Xuyao glanced at Emo Xiaobao, patted Yi Li's hand and said, "Li, go back and rest first. There's nothing else to do here." Yi Li slightly frowned, looking at Emo Xiaobao, who was lying in Emo Xuyao's arms, and looking at her with a pure smile. She sighed and nodded. "I'll go back first. Hey guys. That's enough, don't play anymore." Emo Xiaobao nodded and waved at Yi Li, and then good night, mother. Seeing Yi Li leave with the others, Emo Xuyao snorted and threw Emo Xiaobao out. Emo Xiaobao nimbly turned around in the air and landed firmly on the ground. "Lord Father, you're so cruel." His big black eyes looked at Emo Xuyao, tears welling up in his eyes. Emo Xuyao couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Who taught Emo Xiaobao to be so shameless? Emo Xiaobao pouted his little mouth and snorted. Facing a cruel father like Lord Father who treats his son like grass, what's the use of being shameless? This prince is using gentleness to conquer strength. On the side, Feng Jiao coughed and said, I say prince, that. Shouldn't we deal with it? Pointing at a certain person who was crying out in pain on the ground, Feng Jiao asked. Emo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows. Did I poison him? Prince. Feng Jiao looked at Emo Xiaobao. But he found that Emo Xiaobao was trying to pull Qin Lai away from the scene. Being stopped by someone, Emo Xiaobao turned around and glared at Feng Jiao with hidden bitterness. Feng Jiao also didn't understand how he had offended this little ancestor. He could only rub his nose and smile. Prince, what kind of poison did you give him? We still have to interrogate him. You making him like this? It's not convenient for us to do anything. Looking at Emo Jingli's current appearance, even if they gave him a fierce beating, he wouldn't feel anything. Emo Xiaobao opened his mouth and looked pitifully at Qin Lai. Qin Lai looked up at the sky. The moon was really round tonight. Emo Xiaobao stomped his feet and ran to Feng Jiao's side to discuss with him in a low voice. Don't tell my mother. Feng Jiao hesitated but still nodded. Emo Xiaobao then leaned over to Feng Jiao's ear and whispered a few words. Feng Jiao was stunned and looked at Emo Xiaobao in disbelief. I remember the princess consort said. Emo Xiaobao glared at him angrily. That's why I said you're not allowed to tell mother. Saying this, he didn't forget to give Feng Jiao a threatening glare, then turned around and ran with Qin Lai. From afar, Qin Lai's puzzled voice came. Didn't you say you wanted to watch a show? Emo Xiaobao's voice was clearly flustered. Do you think that looks good? It doesn't look very good. He saw Emo Jingli writhing on the ground and moaning in pain. It would be better to torture him and make him look more interesting. Looking at the two children running away, Feng Jiao's expression twisted. Han Mingxi already had a conclusion in his heart and didn't care. He smiled and patted Feng Jiao, asking, What did the little prince say? Feng Jiao weakly waved his hand and said, Which one of you? Take him to the brothel? A place like the Prince Ding mansion, they definitely couldn't let brothel girls in. The fucking prince was only 11 years old. 11 years old, and he had already drugged Emo Jingli twice in a row. How could this be? He bitterly looked at Emo Xiaoyao at the side. Prince, this subordinate feels that you and princess should strengthen the education of the prince. The corner of Emo Xiaoyao's mouth twitched, nodding in a rare moment of silence. He hesitated for a moment before saying, Brothel? You should go ask Shenyang if he has the antidote. What was called the pupil surpassing the master. Emo Xiaobao's current actions were the pupil surpassing the master. Emo Xiaoyao asked himself if he had ever come across such a genius and such a vicious idea in his life. Emo Xiaoyao, who wanted to teach his son to do bad things, deeply felt that he was too naive. Chapter 1102. Are we going to call Shenyang now? We'll be killed. Feng Jiao shook his head. Han Mingxi coughed lightly and said, I remember. Mr. Shin said before that medicine isn't poison. We can't make an antidote for now. Emo Xiaoyao rubbed his nose and waved his hand, saying, Do as you see fit. I'll leave first. Prince Ding left without hesitation, leaving the mess for his subordinates to clean up. Emo Jingli, who was lying on the ground, was in so much pain that he wished he could die sooner. Even though there was no part of his body that wasn't in pain, as if his entire body was about to explode, he still heard every single word that Feng Jiao and the others had said. Don't kill me. Kill me. Emo Jingli finally understood what the greatest pain in life was. He even wished that he had never entered the Prince Ding mansion, that this was just a terrifying nightmare. Or that he would have been killed by Emo Xiaoyao in the Prince Ding mansion's main hall. A man who had long lost the right to be a man, but had been drugged with an aphrodisiac. Even if he had lost some of his abilities, it didn't mean that Emo Jingli had lost some of his senses. Because of this, the pain he was suffering was twice as much as a normal person. What made him even more fearful was that if other people knew, even though his entire body was covered in sweat, Emo Jingli couldn't help but shiver. Emo Xiaoyao, if you have the ability, then kill me. Do it. At this point, Emo Jingli couldn't hide anything anymore. His voice became sharp and piercing, making people who heard it frown. Many of the people present had entered the palace before, so how could they not hear the strangeness of this voice? This was clearly the sharp voice of the eunuchs who served in the palace. Emo Jingli was originally a very manly and handsome man, but after the end of the year his voice became even deeper and deeper. Compared to the sudden sharpness and strangeness, it was even more hair-raising. What's going on? Feng Xiao asked in horror. Emo Xuyao's character was actually quite good. At the very least he had never told anyone about the cruel things he had done to Emo Jingli. Of course, Emo Jingli himself wouldn't tell anyone about it either. Thus, when Emo Jingli suddenly let out such a strange sound, everyone's gaze fell on a certain part of Emo Jingli's body. Lei Tingfeng coughed lightly and said in a low voice, "Ever since Prince Li's late wife gave birth to a prince, it seems that he has never..." Thus, this person suspected that Emo Jingli had already done that more than 10 years ago. Feng Xiao and the other people of the Prince Ding mansion rubbed their chins thoughtfully. According to what they knew, Prince Li had cheated many things out of Prince Li for the antidote. Could it be that after the prince had cheated him, he had made a fake antidote that not only made him unable to have children, he couldn't even be a man? Emo Shuyao, who was misunderstood, coughed lightly and waved his hand. "Feng-san, I'll leave this matter to you." After saying that, he didn't care about everyone's strange expressions and left with His Highness Prince Ding. Lei Tingfeng and Yelu Hong, who only noticed later, looked pitifully at Emo Jingli on the ground and said with an awkward smile, "We should go back. They're probably still drinking in the hall. Northern Tribe's Crown Prince, let's go back and have a drink?" Yelu Hong nodded and left with Lei Tingfeng. He left this hot potato to the people of the Prince Ding mansion. They only needed to know that Emo Jingli wouldn't be able to make a comeback in the future. Feng Xiao wanted to cry but had no tears. Capturing a captive was no problem, but capturing a captive who couldn't be cured by a strong aphrodisiac, what should he do? Han Mingxi rubbed his nose and said with a smile, just bear with it and it'll be over." When he said this, Han Mingxi also felt a little guilty. Normally, people would be able to bear with it and it would be over, but no one knew whether or not it would be over. The little heir was really too cruel. No one would believe that he didn't know what Emo Jingli was doing. Who would purposely drug someone with aphrodisiac for no reason? In the bedroom of the main courtyard, Yili washed up and removed the accessories and makeup on her body. She leisurely sat on the soft couch and slowly flipped through a book. Even though it was already past the 4th watch period after a busy day, she suddenly relaxed and didn't feel sleepy. Yili sat on the soft couch beside the bed and read while waiting for Emo Shuyao to return. "Wang Fei, it's already so late. You should drink some soup and rest early." Qing Shuang came over with a bowl of chicken soup and said with a light smile. Yili smiled and nodded. She took the chicken soup and tasted it. She smiled and said, "The taste is really good. Qing Shuang's hands are the best. I'm a little reluctant for you to get married." Qing Shuang's face was slightly red and she said coquettishly, "Wang Fei is joking with newbie again." Yili sighed and said, "I'm not joking. You've been by my side the longest. This time, after this matter is over, the prince and I will personally host the wedding for you and Ajin." Qing Shuang's eyes were slightly red and she said, "There is no one in the world who treats Qing Shuang better than Wang Fei." Yili smiled helplessly and said, "You girl, why are you crying? Go and see if the prince has returned. Just leave these trivial matters to the subordinates." Qing Shuang hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and said, "Yes, this servant will take her leave." After a while, Qing Shuang came in and said with a smile, "Wang Fei, the prince has gone to the study." On the soft couch, Yili had fallen asleep with a scroll in her hand. There was still half a bowl of chicken soup beside her and it was slightly cold. "Wang Fei." Qing Shuang walked forward slowly and looked at the beautiful sleeping face in front of her. A complicated look flashed in her eyes. "Wang Fei, are you asleep?" Yili was sleeping peacefully and didn't seem to be affected at all. Qing Shuang bit her lips and whispered, "Wang Fei, I'm sorry." Standing up, Qing Shuang raised her hand and pointed at the sleeping Yili. Just by looking at the skillful finger technique and strength, one could tell that her internal strength wasn't weak. She might even be stronger than Qing Wan, who used to be by Yili's side. A slender hand blocked her finger. Yili, who was in deep sleep, slowly opened her eyes. She sighed helplessly and said, "Qing Shuang, you've really disappointed me." "Wang Fei." Qing Shuang's face changed and she quickly squeezed out a smile. "Wang Fei, what are you talking about? Qing Shuang doesn't understand." Yili shook her head and smiled. "How can you not understand? Agarwood is indeed the most difficult drug to detect. But you shouldn't put mushrooms in the chicken soup. Didn't you smell something wrong with the mushrooms? Mr. Chen said that agarwood is incompatible with many things, such as orchids and mushrooms. Qing Shuang also knew that since she was discovered she couldn't hide it from Yi Li. She said in a low voice, "Wang Fei, I'm sorry." Pulling out the hand that was held by Yi Li, Qing Shuang raised her hand and chopped towards Yi Li. Yi Li didn't show any weakness. With one hand on the soft couch she jumped up and kicked out. Qing Shuang had been by Yi Li's side for more than 10 years. Naturally, she knew Yi Li's strength better than anyone else. She didn't dare to be negligent and pulled out a soft sword to stab at Yi Li. Yi Li's eyes darkened and the short blade in her sleeve flew out. A silver light flashed and shot towards Qing Shuang. Chapter 1103. Seeking Death. Before Qing Shuang's soft sword could reach her, a voice filled with hostility came from the door. A strong gust of wind swept towards Qing Shuang. Qing Shuang was sent flying and hit the wall. She spat out a mouthful of blood and could not get up. Emo Shuyao stood at the door and looked down at Qing Shuang. His cold eyes were like he was looking at a dead person. Qing Shuang knew that she could not escape death today and did not resist. She closed her eyes and stretched her neck to stab. "Shuyao, don't." Yi Li grabbed Emo Shuyao's hand and shook her head. Emo Shuyao looked down at Yi Li's pleading eyes. He sighed and said, "Don't be sad for other people." Yi Li gave him a faint smile and said, "I won't be sad for other people." Turning around she looked at Qing Shuang and asked Yi Li in a deep voice, "Qing Shuang, why?" Originally she would have died if she closed her eyes. After waiting for a while she did not feel any pain. Qing Shuang opened her eyes in a daze and looked at Yi Li with confusion. Yi Li sighed and did not say anything. In the reception hall, Emo Xiaoyao and Yi Li were sitting on the main seats. Not far from them was Emo Xiaobao. There was also Su Qingbai, Chief Steward Emo, Ajin and the others who had heard the news. Qing Shuang was kneeling in the middle of the hall. Her expression was dim and her heart was dead. "Prince Wang Fei, this old servant. Uncle Emo gave a long sigh and kneeled on the ground, asking Prince Wang Fei to punish me. Yi Li stood and helped Uncle Emo up. She said softly, "Uncle Emo, what are you doing? This matter is this Fei's fault to you and Ajin." Qing Shuang and Ajin's marriage had been set. Speaking of this, Qing Shuang was part of their family. If something happened to Qing Shuang, their family would also be implicated. However, Qing Shuang had followed Yi Li for more than 10 years. Speaking of which, it was Yi Li who felt more guilty. "Uncle Emo, please get up." He saying this. "I really don't have the face to face you." Emo Shuyao nodded and said, "Wang Fei is right. Uncle Emo, your family is loyal to the Prince Ding mansion. This matter really has nothing to do with you. Ajin, I'll find you a good wife later, okay?" Emo Shuyao had always been good to the taciturn Ajin. Ajin had been by his side since he was young. Although he was not smart, he was very loyal. Ajin hesitated for a moment before nodding. He had known Qing Shuang for many years, since the two of them were still young boys and girls who didn't know anything. Although he wasn't like Wang Fei and Prince, when Wang Fei said that she wanted to marry Qing Shuang to him, he was still very happy. Seeing Qing Shuang like this now, Ajin felt very sad. However, he stubbornly turned his head away, no longer looking at her. The prince and Wang Fei were the best people and also the people they had to be loyal to. Anyone who wanted to harm the prince and Wang Fei was wrong. Yi Li helped Uncle Emo to sit down by the side, before turning back to look at Qing Shuang, asking mildly, "Qing Shuang, why?" Qing Shuang raised her head to look at Yi Li, smiling helplessly and bitterly as she said, "Didn't Wang Fei already know?" Yi Li looked at Qing Shuang carefully. She still remembered that when she had brought Qing Shuang back to the manor, she had still been an innocent and cute child of not even 10 years of age. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had already passed. At some unknown time, this girl whose eyes were filled with helplessness could no longer be seen. "You are someone of infinite boundless mountain?" Yi Li asked. Qing Shuang nodded. Yi Li said, "Infinite boundless mountain has long ceased to exist. I know that you have not betrayed any information about the Prince Ding mansion all these years. Otherwise you would have already been exposed long ago. Back then, when Infinite Boundless Mountain was destroyed, why didn't you tell me? Could it be that you think that after saying such things I would kill you?" Qing Shuang shook her head, looking at Yi Li as she said, I know that Wang Fei has been very good to me. It is I who have let Wang Fei down. Now that things have come to this, Qing Shuang only wishes for death. Yi Li closed her eyes, a trace of anger appearing on her elegant and gentle face. Only wishes for death? What a good only wishes for death. In your eyes is life so cheap? Not saying anything, not caring about anything, you only wish for death? Or is it that, because the Prince Ding mansion destroyed Infinite Boundless Mountain, you harbor resentment in your heart? If that is the case, this consort will grant you your wish. Qing Shuang, tell me, is your heart with Infinite Boundless Mountain? Qing Shuang lowered her head, not speaking. Yi Li shook her head, sighing. You are not. You have been by my side since you were 8 or 9 years old and then followed me into the Prince Ding mansion. If you really have feelings for Infinite Boundless Mountain, you should have long since gathered quite a bit of information by my side, and could have revealed it to the Lord of Infinite Boundless Mountain. You even have the greatest chance of getting close to little treasure Lin and Exe. Yet you have never done anything. Qing Shuang, tell me why exactly this is? Qing Shuang stared blankly at Yi Li, only lowering her head after a long time. Sparkling tears slid down from the corners of her eyes, dropping drop by drop onto the floor in front of her. Wang Fei, who? Looking at Yi Li, Qing Shuang's tears fell in large droplets. Yi Li looked at her calmly, her expression gentle as she said softly, tell me what exactly is going on. Do you have something that Mo Jingli can use against you? Qing Shuang nodded, saying, my family. I still have a younger brother. He is in the hands of the Li King, and if I don't do as he says, my younger brother will die. Your younger brother? Yi Li frowned. You are not an orphan? When Yi Li had met Qing Shuang that year, she had only been an orphan girl who was about to starve to death on the streets. Afterwards, Qing Shuang had also said that her parents had drowned during the flood. Yi Li shook her head. Since Qing Shuang was someone of Infinite Boundless Mountain, all of this was naturally fake. Qing Shuang shook her head, saying softly, my parents died when I was young and I grew up in Infinite Boundless Mountain with my younger brother. The year I met Wang Fei, there happened to be a flood. Infinite Boundless Mountain then sent a group of people to infiltrate the Chu capital, waiting for an opportunity to infiltrate the mansions of the noble families there. I pretended to be an orphan and was just saved by Wang Fei. Yi Li raised her brows, saying, so, you originally did not want to enter the Yi Manor? Qing Shuang bit her lips and said, for spies like us, many of us will not receive any missions in the end. We can live our lives peacefully like ordinary people. At that time Wang Fei bought me back. I knew that Wang Fei was the fiancé of the Li King, and following her into the Yi Manor could not be considered wrong. Afterwards, Wang Fei's engagement was annulled by the Li King, but I did not expect that she would marry into the Prince Ding mansion. This servant only wanted to live out her days peacefully, so I persuaded the people of Infinite Boundless Mountain that if this servant revealed any information about the Prince Ding mansion, it would definitely arouse the suspicions of the prince and Wang Fei. Rather than revealing some insignificant information, it would be better to keep it for the most important time. In the following few years, Infinite Boundless Mountain did not ask this servant for any more information. Also, the Prince Ding mansion is heavily guarded, and this servant does not know any truly important information. I know. Not long after Madame Dongfang passed away, the Li King sent someone to find this servant. Previously, this servant had always been perfunctory with him. This time he personally came to Glass City, and even brought this servant's younger brother's keepsake. Qing Shuang recounted her story intermittently, and everyone present couldn't help but sigh when they heard it. A girl who had been raised by Infinite Boundless Mountain from a young age, and a younger brother who had been taken hostage, Qing Shuang also had her own difficulties. Chapter 1104. What does Mo Jingli want you to do? Yi Li asked. Qing Shuang lowered her eyes and said hoarsely, If he can't leave Glass City alive, then someone will kill my brother. Unless I can save him and kill Wang Fei alive. I don't want to kill Wang Fei. Yi Li looked at her and said, so, you want to use my trust in you to capture me and then force the Prince Ding mansion to let Mo Jingli go? Qing Shuang nodded silently. Why didn't you tell me directly? Yi Li asked, you know Mo Jingli's personality. Don't you think that after the matter is over, the chances of him killing you is higher than letting your brother go? In comparison, the chances of the Prince Ding mansion saving him are higher, right? Qing Shuang cried silently. She was so worried that her brother was her only family in the world. When she saw his keepsake, her heart was already in a mess. She couldn't help but be forced by Mo Jingli to do something she shouldn't have done. There were some things that weren't easy to persist in, but once you gave up you couldn't take it back. If it wasn't for her help, how could Mo Jingli come and go as he pleased in Glass City? Looking at her tear-filled face, Yili sighed softly. When Mo Jingli came to Glass City, he was already like a stray dog. How could he bring your brother with him? Now that he has been caught by the Prince Ding mansion, how could you have the chance to kill your brother? Qing Shuang, if what Mo Jingli said is true, your brother might still be in Jiangnan. But there is at least a 60% chance. He was already dead. Hearing Yi Li's words, Qing Shuang was in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Li rubbed her forehead tiredly and waved her hand. Take her away first. Send someone to check on her brother. Yes, Wang Fei. Qin Feng waved his hand and ordered the 2 shadow guards to take Qing Shuang away. Miss. I'm sorry. Qing Shuang was taken away by the 2 guards. She turned back to look at Yi Li and bit her lip in shame. Yi Li shook her head and said, You go first. After Qing Shuang was taken away, the flower hall finally quieted down. Her suspicion of Qing Shuang didn't start tonight. After all, to know so much information and be able to secretly help Mo Jingli must be a trusted confidant of the Prince Ding mansion. Ever since Qing Yu, Qing Wan, Qing Xiao, and the others had left, Qing Shuang was the only person she trusted the most. The other 3 often came in and out of the Fu, but the Su family knew Qing Yu and Qing Wan. Yi Li had once suspected Qing Xiao's origins, but she was just a spy that Wang Shi had placed here. Qing Xiao was a smart person. These years she had been well behaved. After becoming a monk, she had been a proper wife and mother. These 3 people didn't have the ability to help Mo Jingli now. Even though she had her suspicions when Qing Xiao really acted, Yi Li couldn't help but feel sad and regretful. Mo Shuyao reached out to hold Yi Li's hand and said softly, Li, why do you want to keep her? Mo Shuyao never showed mercy to those who betrayed Li Li and tried to kidnap Li. If not for the fact that Yi Li was so determined to keep Qing Shuang, Mo Shuyao would have long since struck her with a palm. Yi Li sighed. She has been with me for more than 10 years after all. Fortunately, she didn't make a huge mistake. Let's wait and see. Mo Shuyao frowned. I don't care what you think. Even if she was forced, such a person definitely can't stay by your side. I know. I don't think that way either. Looking at Mo Xuyao's solemn appearance, Yi Li smiled, saying mildly. Even though she had spared Qing Shuang's life on account of their more than 10 years of friendship, how could she keep her by her side? Some things, once they had happened, they could never be erased. No matter who it was, it would always leave a trace in their heart. Looking at Yi Li's still somewhat dejected expression, Su Qingbai smiled mildly. Leah, don't think too much. These past 10 years, that girl also didn't leak any information about you and the Prince Ding mansion to Infinite Boundless Mountain. Thinking about it, these 10 years of interaction weren't wasted. People were all selfish. Their own blood relatives were always the most important. Even the Su family, known as the head of the world's pure-blooded families, would still choose their own kin over those unrelated to them. It was just that Qing Shuang's method of solving the problem was wrong. This also meant that these 10 years of feelings were destined to turn into bubbles. Knowing that her 4th brother was comforting her, Yi Li smiled mildly. 4th brother doesn't need to worry. I'm fine. Your subordinate Feng Jiao requests an audience with Princess. Outside, Feng Jiao hurriedly requested an audience. Come in. Yi Li saw Feng Jiao walk in with a strange expression on his face and hurriedly asked, What's wrong? Mo Jingli sighed. Young Master Feng San's handsome face was slightly distorted. Mo Jingli is dead. Dead? Yi Li was a little surprised. How did he die? Mo Jingli didn't seem to be a resolute and unyielding person. Someone who would rather die than be humiliated. Also, when Mo Shuyao had returned, he had only said that he had captured Mo Jingli. How did he die in such a short time? Feng Jiao scratched his head in frustration, squeezing out a smile. In any case, Mo Jingli is already dead. That, your subordinate actually wanted to ask how we should deal with his corpse. Yi Li glanced at Mo Shuyao, asking, should we return the corpse to the Dechu state? In a few days, the Dechu state would send an emissary to negotiate with the Prince Ding mansion, and bring the young Emperor Mo Suiyun back. Feng Jiao hurriedly shook his head and said, Wang Fei, this. By the time the people from the Dechu state arrive, Emo Jingli's corpse would already be. Why don't we return his ashes to them? Even though he was very doubtful whether the people from the Dechu state really wanted Emo Jingli's corpse, Feng Jiao still didn't want it. Yili frowned. Even though she felt that Feng Jiao's attitude was a little strange, but what Feng Jiao said wasn't without an end. Seeing that Emo Xiao didn't object, she nodded in agreement. Feng Jiao finally let out a sigh of relief, and glanced at Emo Xiao with a strange expression. Emo Xiao looked up and smiled faintly at him. Feng Jiao only felt the cold wind whistling above his head, and hurriedly shrunk his neck back. Yili wasn't in a good mood, and after sitting for a while she returned to her room to rest. The others still had to stay behind to deal with the remaining matters. Fortunately, after today the Prince Ding mansion could truly live peacefully for a long period of time, so everyone present was very energetic and didn't feel tired. Emo Xiao sat on the main seat and discussed with Su Qingbai the arrangements for the envoys from the various countries. After these 2 days, these envoys from the western regions would prepare to depart for their respective countries. Sending off the envoys wasn't a small matter, and tonight's banquet inevitably made people feel that they couldn't enjoy themselves to the fullest, so the farewell banquet had to be held even more grandly. Feng Jiao sat to the side as if he had received an unknown shock. Sometimes he glanced at Emo Xiao, sometimes he glanced at Emo Xiaobao. His eyes were so strange that even Su Qingbai couldn't help but look at him. After Emo Xiao and Su Qingbai finished speaking, Emo Xiao looked at Feng Jiao with a raised eyebrow and said, If you have something to say it quickly. Feng Jiao shook his head and said firmly, I have nothing to say. Chapter 1105. Emo Xiao snorted, not believing him at all. What did Emo Jingli say to you before he died? Feng Jiao shook his head, saying in a small voice, He didn't say anything. I just guessed. What did you guess? I didn't guess anything, but I can see how much you hate Emo Jingli. Feng Jiao spoke without thinking. Prince Ding's methods of torturing people had unknowingly improved. No one knew when he turned Emo Jingli into a eunuch. Turning him into a eunuch was one thing, but he even ordered his son to drug him with an aphrodisiac. Drugging a eunuch with such a drug, it was simply infuriating. Thinking of Emo Jingli's miserable state before he died, Feng Jiao had reason to believe that Emo Jingli had a 90% chance of being stifled by his unquenchable desire, and another 10% chance of being angered to death by the father and son pair, Emo Xiao and Emo Xiaobao. The pitiful ruler of a generation. In the end, he died in such a miserable state. What was worse was that he wasn't the only one who knew of his situation. If Emo Jingli was in heaven, he would probably be angered to death. Looking at Feng Jiao's eyes, Emo Xiao knew that he had misunderstood. But he really couldn't explain to others that he didn't order Emo Xiaobao to drug Emo Jingli. Although he had hinted in this regard, he never thought that Emo Xiaobao would be even more efficient than him. Even if he explained, no one would believe him, right? Emo Xiao thought with some regret. Emo Xiaobao. Looking at Emo Xiaobao, who was trying to slip away by the door, Emo Xiao's lips curved into a happy smile. Emo Xiaobao quickly straightened his body. Father, this child is tired and wants to go back to rest. Emo Xiao nodded. Go, be good. Your confinement begins tomorrow. When your third uncle and fourth uncle get married, Father will ask your mother to grant you a small amount of parole. As he spoke, Emo Xiao gave his son a look at how well Father treats you expression. Imperial Father. Emo Xiao exploded. How can you be like this? Emo Xiao grinned at him. Imperial Father, what did I do? Emo Xiaobao was furious. You clearly said that if I won, the confinement would be waived. I didn't use the shadow guard and Qi Lin from the Prince Ding mansion. I won. Emo Xiaobao stomped his feet. Emo Xiao rubbed his forehead and looked at him with a half smile. Useless? Isn't he a shadow guard? He's my friend. He was no longer a shadow guard. He had not joined Qi Lin yet. He's a free man. Emo Xiaobao argued. Emo Xiao raised his brows. Is it like this? Emo Xiaobao raised his chin and said, Of course it's like this. If you don't believe me, you can ask Emo Hua. Qin Lai isn't a shadow guard. Luckily, this prince was smart and removed Qin Lai's name from the shadow guard first. Emo Xiaobao rejoiced in his heart. Since he dared to make a bet with father, how could he lose over such a small matter? Mo Shuyao's smile was still amiable. Oh? Since it's like this. Then Xin Yang isn't a shadow guard. Xin Yang's medicine naturally doesn't belong to the shadow guard. It can't be considered breaking the rules. Son, don't you think? Right? Gotcha. The lively Mo Xiaobao suddenly froze. Mother. Mother said that if he used medicine that shouldn't be used again, she would harshly punish him. If mother knew that he stole Xin Yang's fragrance something spring something pill, not only would he be exempted from 3 months of confinement, it was possible that he would be locked up for another 3 months. Imperial father is a bastard. Woo. Mo Xiaobao silently cried in his heart. Mo Shuyao didn't feel the sadness in his son's heart at all. The smile on his face was like a spring breeze. The wind was cold. Son, did father say something wrong? Mo Shuyao gently asked. Mo Xiaobao gritted his teeth. No. Father is right, Qin Lai is a shadow guard. Despicable. Bastard. Framing me. Mo Xiaobao stared with all his strength. Idiot. You're still too inexperienced. Mo Shuyao leisurely drank his tea. Then this time father won? Mo Shuyao asked with a smile. Father is right. Mo Xiaobao gritted his teeth. Mo Shuyao lovingly rubbed his son's little head and said, Son, doing bad things isn't a problem, but if you're caught by the adults then it won't be good. In the future. Keep up the good work. Mo Xiaobao bit his cheeks. Father, didn't you get caught by grandfather and uncle when you were young? Mo Shuyao lightly sighed. Father never did bad things when he was young. Mo Xiaobao directly rolled his eyes at him and angrily turned to leave. If I believed you then I'm a fool. Seeing his son's figure rushing out like the wind, Mo Shuyao shook his head with a smile and sighed. I really didn't lie to you. Ever since I was young, people have always praised me for being smart and sensible. Feng Jiao, who was watching the father and son fight on the side, was speechless. That's right, ever since you were young, everyone has praised you. That's because your son is openly insulting you while you're insulting him in the dark. So even now, other than this young master, no one knows that Mo Jingli was messed with by you. Poor Mo Jingli, this young master will definitely go burn incense for you later. You can rest in peace. At least. In the world after death there wouldn't be a creature like Mo Shuyao. After the Prince Ding Mansion's first birthday banquet, Glass City was still bustling with noise and excitement. Everything that happened on the night of the banquet was firmly locked in the Prince Ding Mansion. All the common people happily spent a day that wasn't a holiday, but was more festive than a holiday. Although some people found that their neighbors or good friends were missing the next day, after a long time they just left it as it was. The ones that truly changed their attitude were the envoys from the various countries that came to congratulate them. Although the Prince Ding Mansion wasn't publicly announced, almost everyone knew that Dechu State's deposed Emperor Mo Jingli was already dead. And his death was quite dishonorable. When the nobles heard this news, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. That kind of death was really everyone's nightmare. And the Prince Ding Mansion was able to silently kill an emperor in a short night, even if that emperor was a deposed one. And it was said that Prince Ding and Princess Consort didn't do anything. Everything was done by the 11-year-old little Shitzi. How could people not be respectful and fearful? Because there was an accident at the first birthday banquet of the two children, the host and guests could not enjoy themselves. Ding Wang and Ding Wang Fei invited all the guests to attend the wedding banquet of the Su family's third young master and fourth young master in 10 days. Although the third and fourth young masters of the Su family weren't as powerful and famous as the eldest young master, they were still the direct descendants of the Su family and were Princess Ding's cousin. The fourth young master of the Su family was a powerful official of the border. Especially when he came with the envoys from the western regions, they could be considered close friends. Therefore, all the envoys agreed to attend the Su family's wedding before leaving. The two madams of the Su family were in a hurry to get married. The two young masters of the Su family also wanted to get the beauties. One of the two brides was the former princess of Dechu State, and the other was the granddaughter of Duke Hua, who had sacrificed herself for the country. She was Princess Ding's close friend. This return gift was naturally unprecedentedly grand. Chapter 1106. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of the wedding. The guest courtyard of the Prince Ding mansion was bustling with people coming and going early in the morning. In the spacious room, two beautiful brides in bright red wedding dresses sat side by side. Yili led a group of madams and maidens to dress the two brides. Whether it was Hua Tianxiang or Mo Wuyo, both could be called first-rate beauties in terms of appearance. Hua Tianxiang was bright and moving. Although she was over 20 years old, her appearance still hadn't changed. With a light touch of makeup, she looked even more magnificent and eye-catching. Mo Wuyo looked somewhat similar to Hua Tianxiang, but she had more of a gentle and quiet temperament than when she was young. Perhaps it was because she had studied medicine for a long time, and her experience of helping the world and patients made her look more approachable and kind. Princess Ding, your makeup looks so good." Princess Helan, wearing a fiery red dress, walked around the room curiously. She was from the north, and it was her first time seeing a real wedding in the Central Plains. Seeing the two brides wearing wedding dresses embroidered with dragons and phoenixes and mandarin ducks playing in the water, and putting on light makeup, Princess Helan couldn't help but feel a little envious. Yili looked at Princess Helan with a smile and said, "If the princess likes it, why don't you find someone in the Central Plains to marry? At that time, this consort will personally do your makeup for you." This was naturally a joke. Yili also knew that Princess Helan wouldn't mind such a joke. Princess Helan pretended to think for a while, then shook her head regretfully and said, "Unfortunately, this princess still likes the men of the north. In the future, when this princess gets married, I invite Princess Ding to attend. At that time, I will ask Princess Ding to do my makeup for me." Everyone couldn't help but laugh in unison. They had a better impression of this generous and candid princess. Empress Hua carefully inserted the golden hairpin into Hua Tianxiang's hair and looked carefully. She smiled and said, very beautiful, very beautiful. The princess is right, the princess consort's makeup is really beautiful." Looking at her beautiful niece, Empress Hua's eyes couldn't help but redden. She was such an outstanding child, yet she only got married at this age. Her best years were locked away in her boudoir. "Auntie." Hua Tianxiang held Empress Hua's hand and smiled faintly. "Auntie, am I really that beautiful?" Empress Hua smiled and said, "My Tianxiang is the most beautiful bride. Mother, where's my daughter?" "You've forgotten about your daughter." Seeing his mother's sadness, Mo Wuyu hurriedly spoke up to interrupt his mother's melancholy and acted like a spoiled child. Empress Hua smiled as she pinched her daughter's little face and said, "My Wuyo is also the most beautiful bride. Be good and don't move. Mother will help you comb your hair." Mo Wuyu did not move and allowed his mother to do his hair. Looking at his mother's focused expression in the bronze mirror, he also revealed a sweet smile. "It's time to eat. Bride, it's time to eat." Yungu and Murong Ting came over with a few side dishes and snacks and said with a smile, "Come and eat something. Once it's done, there will be nothing to eat. You'll be hungry for the whole day." This was Murong Ting's experience. When Murong Ting got married, she carried a big apple with her. In the end, she was out of breath from hunger after the wedding. Hua Tianxiang turned around and said with a smile, "Murong Ting, Yungu, thank you." Murong Ting waved her hand indifferently. Yungu pursed her lips and said with a smile, "No need to thank me. Aunt Sue secretly told me yesterday to prepare some food for you, otherwise you'll be hungry. It's so pitiful that you can't eat after getting married. But Sister Hua and Wuyo are both so beautiful." Yili stood up with a smile and helped them arrange the things. She said with a smile, "Does Yungu like Sister Hua and Wuyo like this?" Yungu blinked her eyes and nodded, "I like it. I haven't worn such beautiful clothes before." Murong Ting covered her mouth and said with a smile, "That's easy. Yungu can also get married and wear such a wedding dress." Yungu blinked and was a little confused. "But, who is Yungu going to marry?" Murong Ting smiled more mysteriously and asked quietly, "What do you think of young Master Qingchen?" "Qing. Young Master Qingchen." Yunji's face changed greatly and she shook her head repeatedly. "Oh no." Everyone was at a loss. Young Master Qingchen was not so annoying, right? The little girl was so scared that her face changed. Yili patted Yunji's shoulder and asked softly, "Why not? Yungu doesn't like brother?" Yungu glanced at Yili carefully. "Sister Li, can you not tell young Master Qingchen?" Yili nodded seriously, indicating that she would never spread the news casually. Yungu said with a drooping face, "Young Master Qingchen is so fierce. He makes me copy books every day. The day before yesterday he made me copy the Book of Rites. I asked Sister Qingjing and Aunt Sue. Sister Qingjing clearly said that she had never copied those books before. But if I don't copy, young Master Qingchen will keep staring at me, as if I am very naughty and bad. I still have to learn medicine from my godfather. Last night I wrote until midnight before I went to sleep. Listening to Yunji's soft complaints, everyone looked at each other. What did young Master Qingchen want to do? He scared the little girl like this. Seeing Yili and others' strange expressions, Yungu quickly comforted them. Sisterly, don't worry. I am not afraid of young Master Qingchen. What? Yili asked calmly. Yungu said with a happy face, Godfather told me that after the third and fourth young master's wedding, he will go out to travel. He wants to take me with him. Then we can travel around and help the world. When I come back, I will become the world's most famous doctor. The most important thing was that she would not be forced to copy books by young Master Qingchen every day. Thinking of the unfinished books in her study, Yunji's small hands could not help but tremble a few times. Her small lips also pouted with some grievance. Young Master Qingchen was too bad. Sister Qingjing said that she had never copied so many books in her life. She only needed to read and remember. But young Master Qingchen actually said that she was too stupid and had to copy. She clearly already knew how to recite. Yunge hates young Master Qingchen so much? Hua Tianxiang sat on the left and asked curiously while eating. Yunge quickly shook her head and said, not really. If only young Master Qingchen was not so fierce. Young Master Qingchen gave me a lot of things and even brought me back to live in his house. He is the best to me, just like my father and godfather. Cough cough. Hua Tianxiang and Murong Ting choked at the same time. Mo Wuyu, who was sitting in front of the dressing table, could not help but tilt his neck. Only Yili sat calmly and drank tea. What happened to Sister Tianxiang and Sister Ting Er? Yunge said with some worry. Cough cough, nothing. Hua Tianxiang said with a smile. Young Master Qingchen, rest in peace. When Hua Tianxiang and Mo Wuyu dressed up, it was almost time. Yili took Hua Tianxiang's hand and said with a smile, I will call you cousin-in-law in the future. I wish you happiness. You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.